the executive decision to close the door.
Good job.
Yeah. I know, right? I was like, you know what I could do? Silence it.
Yeah. There's at least one, possibly three entire people that would thank you for it. So,
yeah. Well, not Cody, but he's wrong about a lot of things. So.
I mean, if he noticed, he'd probably thank you for it. So
that's true. He probably would.
He seems like a well-adjusted stand-up kind of guy. So.
I wouldn't.
You just say that because he agrees with you.
I say that because we're live and I'm being recorded, but what I tell him is private. Yeah.
See, that's the difference between us. I'll tell him he's a piece of shit in private too.
Oh wow.
Sure. I mean, he's not a piece of shit, but I'm just.
You'll tell him. You would.
I would tell him that in public and or private. Okay, welcome to the Not Dresden Files podcast, where today we're
talking about a different book series.
We indulged the director for some reason.
Yeah, if you have not read Gideon the Ninth, I suggest you go away because we're probably going to spoil everything about Gideon the Ninth and try
because you might like it. You might actually end up liking it. So if you don't want things spoiled that you might end up liking, then you should go away. Otherwise, feel free to stay. Ben's going to learn some things about the book, so it'll be fantastic.
Because he didn't bother to read the book in the month that he had. No, you read 5 chapters.
Doesn't count.
Reading a synopsis. I read what I could. It wasn't an issue of time, but just. But I get it, right?
Like an issue of commitment to this podcast and the content we make.
I mean, if that's what it is, then I should have been out a long time ago.
You still did the homework. I mean,
yeah, but out of spite.
This time, there's always something to talk about. I mean, I'm not sitting in judgment of the book. I'm just.
Yes,
I think the perspective.
Ben, how much Bleach?
Said it wasn't.
Ben, how much Bleach did you watch?
Bleach.
That does help.
Yeah, I don't think I've talked about Bleach.
But have you watched it?
No.
Okay, well then I was trying to give you an avenue by which to talk about these characters, but that's not going to work.
Oh, okay. Oh, is it kind of derivative from that?
Yeah, it's like well, that's what I likened it to. Is it's like captain and lieutenant relationship between all these people mixed in with a little bit of Hunger Games.
See, the writing seemed to me sort of like John Scalzi doing a Neil Gaiman impression in the Warhammer 40k universe. That's kind of what I
know some of those words.
Like John Scalzi, he did the Red Shirts book.
Nope.
Yeah, but I've never read. I know who he is, but I've never read his book, so I don't. The writing style comparison to him doesn't really.
Yes, I know.
Help.
So Neil Gaiman. So some of the kind of more officious dialogue that wasn't the meme verse kind of talk from the main character. It did kind of have that sense of mythology and weight and stuff that I really like. I'm not so much into the quippiness in this setting, and I'm not so much into the grimdark setting, but I can see how that's attractive to people.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that because I definitely likened it to grimdark in some ways, but at the same time, to me. So if you'd read the book, to me, once you go through it, they're so clearly not the villains of their own story, right? Even though it starts to become very obvious that quite possibly they are the bad guys in the universe. And that was kind of an interesting kind of flavor because they're all just normal, well-adjusted people. This is just everyday life to them. I don't think for a minute. I mean, I'm a pleb when it comes to Warhammer 40k, right? So if I'm off the mark here, then that's whatever. But I don't think for a minute anybody in the Imperium thinks that they're the good guy, right? There are a couple exceptions, right? You've got a couple of the guys that are actually heroes, like the Primarchs and whatever. But I think at the end of the day, most of them realize that they're a bunch of bastards. And I think the main, Nana Gessimus anyway, I think she knows she's a bastard, but Gideon's mostly a bastard to Harrowhark, but everybody else, they're all just there. And it becomes even more a little bit obvious to the point where I am in the second book, right? Where it's just this is just literally every day to them, right? If you take away the gothic imagery, if you take away the fact that they're literally dabbling in human remains and stuff like that, it's just everyday life, right? But for them, it's science, and it's just kind of interesting. But I'm guessing I'm hoping that's kind of where the series goes on a grander scale. Is that somebody at some point is wait, are we the baddies? because some of the stuff they're doing in the second book is terrifying. Like there's no two ways around it. Like if you contextualize that from the outside of what the characters are looking for, it's just straight up like, no wonder everybody is trying to eradicate you. Minor spoilers, like it's such a tiny impact to the overall story, but you do get some little breadcrumbs as it goes. But yeah, it's kind of funny that you said grimdark, because I think you should go in understanding that's how it is, which, to me, the primary thing there is there are no happy endings. So you should know that. But at the end of the day, like the day to day is like, yes, I woke up and, used the sonic shower before I put on human remains and, traipsed around this dilapidated, crumbling building, which is just the best that we have. And also the seat of the Empire's power. And it's like, after the resurrection, we just never patched the holes in the roof. Like, did we not care? Did we not have
those
the
are questions
resources?
That kind of sort of get addressed in the second book. But
it's very Library of Alexandria, right? Like, here's the seat of all your knowledge, and we're just going to leave it there. Enjoy.
Right. Well,
this
and
is
it's
the puzzle
it's
box
weird
that has
too.
the answers to the universe, sort of. And then we can never return, and no one is allowed to be there, except for now we need some people to fill our ranks, and so let's send a bunch of teenagers there. Not everyone is a teenager, but like half of them was.
Well, I mean, like the oldest was like, okay, I think wasn't
might be the oldest, and I got the impression
the Pence were like in their 30s and 40s. Yeah,
like Magnus and then we're probably
Abigail Pent, Magnus Quinn, they were 37 and 38 respectively. Technically, Protozalowis was 39, and so he would be the oldest.
That's the 8th Cavalier, right?
No, Protozalowis was the 7th.
I was gonna say, wait, there was one definitely really old dude there.
Yeah, I got the impression that the 8th Cavalier was like quite up there in age. The soul sucking.
Colin Ash.
Yeah.
There's some details in the back of the book.
I was pretty sure. Wow.
32, 34, or 37.
Well, every other time he struck me as 80.
He's certainly a damaged person. He's kind of beaten down, but he's somewhere in his 30s compared to a 16-year-old asshole.
He was 16, that guy?
He was 16.
I got the impression that he was like way
older. Silas Octakizaron, being 16, I always expected him to be the same age as Palamedes, Sextus, and Sextus is about 20, and Silas is 16.
I kind of pictured Camilla older. I mean, not like super old, but
No, she and Sextus are both 20.
Right.
Yeah. These people are very young, and Isaac Teteris was probably the youngest at 13.
Oh, and the second house ones, I kind of pictured them as like these 30, 40-year-old veteran types,
21 and 27.
Which, again,
22 and 27.
Shows you how much I was paying attention. But
they're all just unreasonably young, but then, like, that's what Judith had said of a Captain Judas of the second house. She had entered into the service of the Emperor at 6 years old. They start so young. She's already a grizzled veteran by the age of 22.
Yeah, I mean, I just kept picturing them as like these old Roman soldiers.
Yeah,
that was pretty much it.
Well, and even Nana Gessimus, like she starts at like 4.
Yeah, I thought
there's so many references of like, and then I had mastered this subject by the time I was 4. And it's like, bro, some 4-year-olds don't talk. Like, what the hell,
Yeah,
and
she
so
was
like
a baby genius skeleton raiser.
Right.
Well, at least she was made to be that way.
Right.
I get the impression that so that every house except the 9th basically serve in this war, and every house can send people to the war, but he's like the 9th are basically like, we're off on our own. We got sent here to die. Find out.
Well, it seems like it's how everybody wants it to be.
And then they just it seems like they basically just mind their own business.
The 9th house has and does occasionally send people to the cohorts, but their population dwindled so badly that they have nobody to send anymore. So, like,
about
Gideon
10 years
could go
ago.
join the cohort, but it would be the first one in like 5 years that had.
It's been longer than that, right? Like,
there's an
unless
offhand
any of the
mention
adults
somewhere.
left.
I don't remember if it's in the first or second book of just like, well, it had been like 5 years since anyone had ever been in the cohort. Yeah, it was in the second book when they talked about like deaths, because that was the last time that they had to do a funeral for someone in the cohort.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, this is where I initially got the Hunger Games vibes from. It's like, this is District 13. They're off. Nobody gives them any like props. Everybody's kind of like with the exception of thinking they're even creepier and scarier. But nobody thinks anything of their Cavalier and haven't for like 100 years or whatever.
Mhm.
It was also
Grindhouse Cavaliers are expected to be someone who carries around bags of bones because that's what the necromancer needs to function better. It's just more bones, more volume. That's how you get more skeletons to go do the spooky things.
But Harrow does not need that.
Well,
Well-
it's also ridiculous because of how efficient they are, right? Like, to me, one of the most magical elements of it is like, oh, I've got a knuckle bone that I've raised an army of skeletons from, that it's just like their mass to effect ratio is like, and we're not talking like they're bird bone skeletons, right? Because sometimes like Gideon makes them look like they're just made of like, so much sand and plaster at times. But like when they fight, they're like full bodied, skeletons, everything you'd imagine. And she summoned them from like earrings or whatever, and it's just like so much craziness for that. But
Yeah. And Harrow she does need the bones around, and she does stash bones on Gideon's clothing, which is very creepy when Gideon realizes what had happened to her. But mostly she thought she needed someone to just kind of stand there and look the part, considering she did have Ortis, who would have only been a guy who carries around a bag of bones for Harrow because he was not a warrior. He had instead focused too much on poetry.
and generally being a coward, which gets expanded on. So
Yeah,
okay, so we've been all over the place. Do we want to go down a high level so that Ben can keep up with us?
I suppose since we have
like Ben, you didn't even make it out.
I-
Did you even make it out of the ninth house? Like, that's why I'm kind of lampooning you. It's like you didn't even get on the road, so to speak, right? We're still just meeting this petulant child, Gideon the Ninth, in the first 5 chapters. So
I figured I had an hour of material if it came to that to talk about what I understood of kind of the approach to writing and characters and world building, which I think are interesting questions. But I wasn't going to interrupt, and I wasn't going to make
Okay, hold on.
large scale.
This is what you've read. This is what you didn't.
Okay,
right.
I have it on an Amazon app, so I didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's not what I read. Mine came in PDF form. No, actually,
but
it came in some other form that I had to convert because that's how life works these days.
It was a difficult read for me. I guess
It is though. It's a hella chaotic book. I'd be curious to revisit it as audio, but like to me, it's all over the place. It wasn't an amazingly fun read. So I'm poking at you because you're like, I read 5 chapters and I'm ready to talk about it, which is not the case, right? But like I also understand that as adults we got to decide what to do with our time, right? We start to realize that time is the more finite resource, and I'm not just going to smash my face into this book. And I probably would have been there myself, except that about halfway through the book, that's where you get to the first kind of major plot development where it's just it's exploration. It's meeting the characters. Not a Gesimus has got an agenda. Gideon hates her. Gideon likes this girl.
Sure.
Wait a minute. Dead bodies. And then it starts to be like,
Scooby-Doo.
I remember when I was first getting into the Dresden Files, I had a friend of mine tell me, you got to keep reading the first 3 books. And I was a single guy, no kids, nothing to do with my time. And so I could totally do that. And I hated it. And then it's like, wait, you killed off a character in book 3, kind of, maybe not really, right? It's Susan.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I was like, whoa, hang on, there's something more going on here. I get to book 4, and I love book 4. Of course, it's like one of my top in the whole series. So, and then I'm hooked. But it's one of the things where I've read a lot, I've watched a lot, and there's certain tropes that just are really jarring to me, and I don't want to spend time with. I don't want to. I'm not really comfortable immersing myself with. Like, there's the crassness and the grimdark would be enough, but then the quippiness just undercuts, I think, what is good. I think there's a lot of good in what I did read in terms of writing style, but I was lost very, very early on. I kept reading a couple more chapters. I don't remember if it was chapter 5 or 6. It was something along the lines. It looked like it said 20% of the book. So I thought it was more than that, but anyway. But I did read the plot synopsis to kind of see how it ends, and I appreciate there's some, like bold choices towards the end. No spoilers.
Well,
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess
We'll
okay.
build
Then we spoil everything, but I'll let the people who read the book
We'll
get
build
to
it
talk
up,
about
I
that.
guess. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's
Once
a lot of
again,
stuff
you should jettison if you care, because it's a big. There are several big, points like that in my opinion. So, but
Sure.
yeah.
Right. So I guess to set it up is there's these 9 houses. Gideon and Harrowhark are of the 9th house, and they hate each other, always have, and they both have to go to the planet of the first house to complete a trial, because Harrowhark is going to get the opportunity to become a lictor. The lictor is a necro saint, something or other, servant of the emperor, a finger and a gesture and a hand, and the poetry of it I actually really enjoyed, but it's awkward when I say it. The lictors they're not very well known. They know that they're there. They do very grand, important things, but even their names have been forgotten into history. And they've been 10,000 years old. But over 10,000 years, a myriad, they have slowly died off and dwindled. And so they need to replenish the ranks. And so they ask for the necromantic heirs and their cavaliers of each house to go to the first house planet and complete the trial, figure out how to become a lictor, and either do so or not. And that's how we have 16, 17 people on a planet, and then they start dying.
The end.
Some are pushed,
What's
some
the
fall.
specialization of each house? Because I'm not sure I remember all of them.
You want to go over who's in each
You
house?
want to go through a cast of 17 characters?
You want to read
no,
the dramatist
seriously, my
personae off the first page?
No,
Yeah.
each house has like a specialty, right? Like
Uh,
ninth is
so-
specialty.
The first house is the Emperor's house. That's where all the lictors come from. The second house is the cohort.
Yeah, there's a poem in
They
the
don't have-
beginning
they
that
don't
kind
have
of
specialities in the
describes
second
it.
house. I guess
The
that's just cohort.
They're mostly cohort. 2 is for discipline, heedless of trials. So they're mostly the cohort. They're mostly very regimented military. Here's how the order of things have to go. That's why Judith was trying to force everything into the framework that she has been trained since birth to understand and believe that this is how everything should go. 3 is for the gleam of a jewel or a smile. They're very they're into very pretty things. But they're also about pushing boundaries and seeing how ostentatious they can be.
I don't even remember who was in third house now. It's really hard to keep track of.
The Trident Terrae.
Yeah, the names do kind of help.
The
Ianthe and
twins
Coronabeth,
and-
Tidentarius, and Naberius Turn.
You know, the
Oh,
one,
yeah,
the one that kind of becomes
Yeah,
important.
that
later.
was third house. That was third house, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you start the second book? Because
Yeah,
Nope.
He did. He was complaining very quickly to me.
yes.
yeah.
It's really bad.
No, it's not.
Okay. Yeah. So the fourth house was the kids.
Yeah,
What
their
is-
fidelity and facing ahead, and they have a reputation of being very reckless. They die very early, very quickly, so they try to have a lot of children. That Isaac mentions that he's got 4 brothers and sisters, and they're very likely to be orphans because they join the cohort. They go right to the front line and die on a grenade or something.
Good thing that trend doesn't hold.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. 5 for tradition and debts to the dead. They're generally the spirit callers. They like Abigail Pent was a very competent spirit caller, talking to ghosts all the time, and they have some secrets about what they might learn from the ghosts. But they also do stick to tradition a lot, and like the sense of formality. Here's how a dinner party is supposed to go, with all of the little name tags of like, here's where you sit, and here's the different courses and all that.
Easily
Well,
my
and
favorite house.
They were very
I
fun.
think it's also notable that, as good as like she was as a necromancer, though not necessarily compared to the cast that we have, she's actually infinitely more renowned as a historian, which,
Yes.
being able to talk to the dead is probably a little bit useful there. But like, that's the other thing too. It's like, these guys aren't just necromancers and cavaliers. Like, some of them have day jobs, not the 13-year-old, but, like Abigail, she's published papers, right? And she's one of the nerdier people, which, unfortunately, spoilers, you don't get a lot of her in book 1, so which is kind of a tragedy, because like I didn't understand any of that until I read the appendices at the end, where it's like Deuteros, I think, right? One of the second house like had dossiers on everybody, and so you get a little bit more information, and straight up some of these characters don't shine on page until you read those appendices.
You don't get that in the audiobook.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
I forgot the appendices were there, but
it's just like
they-
the Silmarillion. You got to read the appendices.
Right. Yeah, and then 6th house with the Master Warden. So
right.
I think
So-
Calamities was my favorite outside of the main
Oh,
characters.
definitely.
So
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's like so. Yes, everything picks up at around just a little under halfway when the dinner party and then the aftermath. But the part when I get excited of re-listening to it again is really the introduction of the sixth house, because him and his point of view is banter with Camilla. Camilla is also a great character in the very dry way of going back and forth. I do quite enjoy their little quips to each other.
I did get a really good chuckle out of "Don't ask me how I am." So how are you?
I see your bluff, and I resent it.
That's pretty good.
It's just even just the introduction of like, this is impossible, but it's there. Like, this is 9,000 years old, and that's 50 years old. It's like, maybe the building's shy. Too fuck shit for the building then.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's the fact that Palamides is the most wizardly out of the group, and we get the thing. So he's all manner of quirky, but he's also kind of like a stand-up guy, type of thing as well. Like there's just so much fun there.
He is genuinely a genius for how he was able to figure things out and so quickly to be able to know how bad things were going to get. Like it was just a little after halfway when in an argument with Judith, he says, God help you when you do understand, because he had already figured out how it becomes a lictor and refused it. Right. And sixth house is for truth over solace in lies. So they are generally recording everything. They are the protector of a lot of their historical record. Abigail was talking about, like, I really want to see some of these old literal documents, but no one is allowed to see the real thing. It's in a case full of helium, so it'll survive the heat death of the universe. Light is damaging, and over their perspective of 10,000 years, they're going to protect things for another 10,000 years at least.
They're uber nerds. They're librarians.
Yes, they're the sixth house librarians. Right. 7 for beauty that blossoms and dies. They're the classic gothic, I'm going to be so beautiful while I die in such a tragic way.
Well, and they have like a hereditary cancerous disease, right?
Yes.
Was kind of the backdrop of that character. Like Dulcinea, you get like the classic, invalid from like, Jane Eyre books or whatever, where it's just like, oh, I'm just going to lay here on this sofa the entire time. And, it's kind of funny because Gideon attaches to her very readily, and how that plays out and stuff. But, she almost never, is seen off of a couch somewhere because her house, they have this disease. It probably could get cured, but they also have this mysticism that they think it makes them better necromancers. So they don't, And,
I mean, it kind of does.
They use the slow death to give them magic, right?
Yeah, the cancer does kill them.
That's what we're told.
Gives them more death energy.
But the final reveal kind of undercuts a lot of that, right? So
to a degree, you don't know. I mean, it's probably sound in principle, but then this thing is like, yeah, but I'm gonna live here now, so too bad.
So 8th house, bunch of assholes. 8 for salvation, no matter the cost. They care so much about morals and truth, but it's so conveniently whatever it is that they want it to be. So the 8th house and the 6th house butt heads quite a lot.
Are the White Council?
Yes.
They're so double,
and they're even white.
The one thing their God Emperor has said is really, really bad is don't use the soul-sucking magic because it lets in really dangerous ghosts into bodies. Don't do it. It's very bad. Dangerous is the one thing he said we get told in the book. And they're just like, no, that's what I do, and that's fine because I think it's right.
Yes, it's motivated reasoning to a highest degree of this is moral because I said so, but fuck them 9th houses because they went against what the Emperor said.
Supposed to die.
Yes. So as we meet everyone on the planet, there's, as an example of how they push the boundaries, the 3rd house did bring in not just one necromancer and a cavalier. They brought 2 necromancers because they were twins. They were born at the same time, and so they are both considered the Princess of Ida. And we see how that plays out in an interesting way at the reveal. But let's see where to go from here.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. There's a facility, there's a key, there's those things like the one rule of the house is do not go past a door that you do not have permission to enter. Therefore, you have to ask, do I have permission to enter this key? And not everyone is smart enough to figure that out. Harrow was the first one to do so. and Sextus followed not long after, and Octokizron not long after him. Probably they find out all the doors that are locked, and they start from the bottom up, and they find the facility. The facility is fucking terrifying because there's monsters down there. It is dangerous.
I also like the fact that like up to the point that you get to explore the lab for the first time and everything like that, everything is decrepit and everything is fallen apart and it's just very gothic in style and everything. And then you get to the lab and it's like perfect. And it's such a contrast to what we've seen so far, right? Where it's like in the ninth house, everything's been dead for almost 1,000 years. You know, like even they're like the house is falling apart. And I mean, we used to have kids, but not anymore. And then you go into the lab and it's like, obviously it's been hermetically sealed more or less for like, 10,000 years, but they might as well have just left, in some ways. And it turns into a different kind of horror movie. Because it's like the first Resident Evil movie. I'm sorry to
Resident Evil vibes. This is exactly what
it's straight up because it's like you're in this mansion and you're following this couple around, and then they're like, "Oh shit, we were living on top of this lab the whole time," and so then that helps things start to get a little bit interesting. And it's funny because like Gideon just like stumbles into it. And then we find out that Nana Gesimus has probably been down there for a while. Like she's been down there for like 3 days, but yeah, it's such a contrast, for the rest of it. But yeah,
the facility has a lot of trials, and these trials can be defeated by a necromancer and cavalier both. But Harrow had gotten it into her head that she can solve everything on her own. That does not need her cavalier, and so she was trying and failing for 27 hours, and then collapsed into a bone to be able to hide the fact that she was dehydrated and in kind of dire need of help. And so once Gideon goes looking for her with a purpose and then yells at her, it's like, "You're making me look bad. You were the one who said that the ninth house needs to look good and proper and traditional, and you're deviating from every point." Harrow has to, it's like, "Okay, fine, we'll be this together. But you're going to do exactly what I say. But that means sticking to Harrow's idea of what it is. And Gideon deviates in a way that is very predictable for her. It's like, there's a monster. It kind of looks like it has swords. I want to fight it. And that is the level of problem solving for her. It looks like something with swords. I want to fight it. It wasn't anything about like mystical problem solving, necromantic theory, anything. It was just, I'm going to fight the monster. That happened to be the thing they needed to do.
Very happy.
And she was like how that whole scene starts out, right? Is like she's just supposed to be Nana Gesimus's eyes, and Nana Gesimus keeps sending in skeletons because that's her thing. The ninth house's whole thing is bone magic, right? All of the houses have a specialty. We're talking about spirit siphoning and spirit magic and spirit calling and whatever, right? But the ninth house just does skeletons, which is also pretty quaint compared to all the other houses. They were like, why? It's not a particularly robust or effective magic, but okay. But you guys are the masters at it. So Gideon is just supposed to be watching. And after like dozens of failed attempts, she's like, yeah, I want to fight it. And she basically like sneaks into the room, after Nana Gesimus had told her in no uncertain terms not to go inside. And then, they start to realize like how to solve it. Right. So it was kind of fun because you get into a lot of stuff that, like you start to finally get into the magic system a little bit. You find out that the necromancers can take the senses of, or enhance the senses of the cavalier. You find out that the construct is made out of this regenerating, material, but it's also held together by magic. So it takes a necromancer to see the weak points and the cavalier to fight them. And enforce teamwork basically is what that trial was about. But it was so cool watching all of that unfold, and that it was also very much a trial because it's like once the necromancer left the room, it shut down the trial, and then the construct got like slurped back into a mechanism, and then you go back in and it resets and throws it out again. But.
And that's when the hero was like, "Oh, I guess I do need a cavalier. Like I guess we can respect each other a little bit," and they start going around. But before the completing of the trial and between figuring out how the mechanism seems to work and completing, there's that dinner party because Abigail and Magnus had their anniversary. It was actually the day before, and Abigail forgot, but Magnus didn't. And so let's make a party of everyone, and everyone is invited. And everyone is there, and it's weird and awkward, and there's some fighting, and there's some interesting things. And Jean-Marie Chateau is like, Gideon, how big are your biceps? Because that's what the Cavaliers care about. And really, really dumb jokes. Like, Gideon likes dumb jokes, but that one was particularly bad in a corny way. And then when they disperse, Harrow and Gideon finish the trial of the imaging response monster, and they get a key to another door. And as they're leaving, they find Abigail and Magnus dead in the facility, and they have no idea why, but it was very bad. Everyone
splattered at the bottom of a very treacherous ladder, basically, right? Because they set that up for a couple of chapters, that they've got to haul Harrow Hark up after she's passed out through this ladder, and how dangerous everything was. And then they get the trial done, they come out, and it's like splatter, and it's like, oh shit, I liked those guys. Wait a minute.
Yes, that was the moment when Andrea started selling me angry memes, and I started laughing.
I like to have the fifth house.
Well, they're dead. Get over it.
Yeah,
they're very likable.
Well, this is also the part where it's like, to me, some of their platitudes about their mysticism and everything kind of unravel a little bit, because it's like, they're necromancers.
Yeah, there's how many of you? You're supposed to be able to revive the dead, and none of you can do this.
Right. The Necrolord Prime, who is the resurrector of the entire system and all of this stuff, like, he didn't leave instructions. You guys don't have medics that can raise the dead or whatever. And I mean, to be fair,
Abigail was the one to do that. She would have been the one.
Yeah, that's fair. A little bit, but Palamides does some too, and they basically were like, their spirits are not here, which becomes like a hole in the second book, in my opinion. This thing's not super airtight, but we'll call it how it is now. But yeah, like, there are all these necromancers, and it's like, we don't know what happened, and we can't talk to the spirits, and all on and on and on. And it's like, seems like a weakness in your necromancy. Right.
It's also something about how difficult the facility is in the first house planet. Of like, some things are weird here. These things should have worked, and they didn't, and so they try so hard that things just don't work. And then Octokizaron shows up, and he disperses Column from his body to be able to try to use that as a siphon of power to then call Abigail and Magnus back even further. And Protezalawis gets up and hits him in the face, which causes an inter-house incident that needs to be answered with a duel.
Which she totally orders her zombies to do on purpose, right? Because
So she was also making sure that they don't get the information. Because spoilers, someone is not as they see.
She thought it might work. Now that we're talking about it in hindsight and everything, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what happened there. So,
I just saw it so early, like who the bad guy was.
Yeah,
so early.
Well, and there are some things, and I mean, some of it is like you're twigged to it by Nana Gessimus, right? Because she has somehow figured it out, but because you're largely following over Gideon Nav's shoulder, you're clueless for a lot. Yeah, you're clueless for a lot of it. Like, she's dumber than Harry Dresden. Like, she is dumb, right? And all you get is, Nana Gessimus treat her like a puppy for most of the book, where it's just like, do what I say when I say it. She's not to be trusted. Don't do anything. And so you don't know why, but I think you get like an I told you so at the end too. It's like, I told you she wasn't to be trusted. It's like, yeah, but empathetically, like, she's also one of the most harmless people on screen, right? So there's all these tropes that kind of line up to point you in that direction. It's not like amazingly,
but she's
subtle.
Also coughing up her own lungs at every turn. So it's like, how could she possibly have done anything?
That's how you know she's dangerous.
Because she has necromancy.
Well, and the fact that she's dangerous also kind of belies the fact of what she is at the end of it all too. Like, yeah, okay, great. She's dangerous. You didn't know she was the effing Terminator. So yeah, because she's also not the only dangerous person there. They're all dangerous in a way, but
yes.
Yeah.
So after this inter-house incident, there's kind of the reveal of some people don't have the same level of understanding of what's going on than not. Like, the second house did nothing but show up to the first house planet and eat breakfast. They weren't trying to figure anything out. They weren't asking to find keys. They weren't doing any of the trials. And then they realize that there's a facility and there's keys. And Judith immediately starts trying to take control over everything because there's been a death. And according to her rules, the cohort gets to be in charge when the emperor is not there, and something to do with rules. And everyone basically tells her to pound sand. They're not giving up their keys. The keys are important. And like even inside like the third house, Ianthe had the facility key. She had taken it from Naberius because he didn't keep track of his shit. And Coronabeth and Naberius were caught off guard of like, why have you been down there without us?
Right.
And then so there has to be a duel between Protesilaus and Column the Eighth of solving this thing. The Cavaliers are going to fight it out, and then something was supposed to happen. But Pro never shows up. He never comes back. Something happened.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes.
He
And
had a very short trip into
yeah. He goes missing, and they go looking for him. And at this, Dulcinea was caught out in the rain, and she has now pneumonia, and she's dying in the classical kind of like you said, Jane Eyre Gothic way of, oh, I'm just a poor thing, and I'm just gonna cough myself to death. Everyone's all up in arms. But the fourth house, because they're very attached to the fifth house, they get a little crazy in their teenage ways, and they stop sleeping, following everybody, figuring things out. Harrow and Gideon go back into the facility to try to solve another trial. And right before Pro disappears, there was the other trial, the siphoning trial. Sorry, I'm telling these things out of order. And that one was bad enough that Sextus wasn't going to do it because he's a ninny over Camilla and he wouldn't do anything to hurt her. Harrow has to.
Whereas,
yeah.
Not against him. It's like, well, if Palamides didn't do it, that's double go for me. So
yes, he has to learn that things are uncomfortable. Well, he knows. He did the math, and the math was bad. But Harrow doesn't do the math, and she just says, I'm determined. It has to happen now. I have to be a lictor before everyone else dies. And she siphons from Gideon and has to go through this emulsion field. It's like stripping the liquid from her eyeballs and destroyed all of her clothes and everything like that to go over to the other side of a long passageway, get a key, come back. And in the entire time, Gideon is screaming in pain and basically dying. It's literally pulling her life energy. And Dulcinea is just like, oh, there. Don't do this. Don't let anyone ever do this to you again. Like, that's a hint.
Yes, it was very
yeah.
And then they get a key, they go away, then Pro disappears, and Harrow has another key. She goes, finds a literal lab of everything, and Camilla comes up to look at Gideon because she had nearly died and passed out. It was like, you should be brain dead, but you're not. This is weird. And
you have to have a brain to be brain dead.
That is very true. But Camilla was like, well, can you see fingers? Like, how many fingers? Like, okay, so your eyes are working, but the math would have put Camilla to being brain dead or nearly so if everything had gone correctly. And the fact that Gideon is normal is just entirely puzzling. Normal. Yes, she is also a nerd with glasses and a skull face.
To highlight on that a little bit too, like that was one of the more unsatisfying things about the book is that they keep talking about there are a lot of moments where they come up to answering a question and they give you a direction to say like Gideon is special and there's something going on there, and then none of that ever pays off in my opinion.
It will.
And you think so. I've got like 100 pages left of the second book, so if they get there, that's great, and I'm hoping for that.
No, she's banking on the third book. Look at that face.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping for. But I'm just saying, like,
I'm gonna be fucking pissed.
There's payoff.
Okay, thank you, because so far that was one of the more frustrating things of the first book. They do fill in a lot of gaps finally, like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the second book, right? The second book is brutal in different ways, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But yeah, like that was one of the things that just felt completely unsatisfactory, especially at the end, is because like they're setting up all these mysteries, they're setting up all this stuff, and then just you don't always get a payoff. And I'm like, what's the point?
There is an answer, but the only one who knows the answer isn't telling. And It's like, so even though it's extremely puzzling and Sexus and Camilla are very intelligent, they should be able to figure this out. They don't have the information to be able to actually do it. They don't know what they're looking at. In eating dinner, there's an argument further about between Judith and Corona Beth and Teacher and Sexus, because Corona wants her the same number of keys, and Judith's kind of slow on the ball. And Sexus points out there's only 1 or 2 keys left that hasn't been claimed, and then everyone is stunned. It's like, surely you must have noticed. You must have been keeping track, because he is a genius and he doesn't realize how everyone else is a few IQ points lower than him. And Gideon is like, oh, why did I think that there were like infinite number of keys or enough keys for everyone to have a full set? Of course, there's only 8 keys.
I think the idea actually was that they were supposed to work together, but
Working together or not, that's not the point.
Yeah, so spoilers, right? Obviously, we've all been there except for Ben, but like, so they straight up meet the Emperor at the end, right? And he does tell them, like, this is not how it was supposed to go. You really were supposed to like meditate and make a conscious choice, which not all of us got the chance to, right? So it was not meant to be like a bloodbath. The houses weren't meant to be fighting from each other. Some of them got pushed, but some of them obviously came there with an agenda themselves, right? But yeah, like, it was absolutely open to them to work together and solve the process together or not, and make a conscious choice. Like, if Calamities decides that being a lictor isn't worth the cost, then that's how it's supposed to go, right? Whereas Nana Gesimus, obviously, she wanted and in a sense needed to become a lictor, right? And several other characters. So that's what drives them, right? But at no point was, oh, well, there's only 8 keys, we better start bumping us off. That was not on the roadmap. you know,
it wasn't even. That wasn't even the designs of the person who was fucking it all up anyway.
Only somebody had put that in a scroll.
Yeah, right. Or told Teacher, but instead he's given like 3 lines, and then he's like, everything else goes. Have fun.
There's only the one rule of please don't go through a door without permission. That is it. It is the keys technically belong to the Cavalier. That's
like, if you want them to work together, maybe make a second rule.
Right. Well, and to the point where it's like when Deuteros and the cohort start trying to take over, he's like, yeah, you misunderstand that, like, anybody but the Emperor can pass laws around here. Like, nobody cares that you're a part of the cohort. Like, they're not coming.
No,
every time.
This was big Sorcerer's Stone vibes, where it's like, don't go in the Forbidden Forest and don't go to the third floor trapdoor. Other than that, enjoy.
Right.
Welcome to Hogwarts.
Oh, okay.
I hope you survive.
Right. Yeah.
The West is forbidden.
Right. Yeah. The third floor on the right hand side or whatever. I just saw that meme. Right. But and it's funny you say that, because I cannot shake. I know it's the incorrect view, but I cannot shake the fact that oh God, I can't remember his name. Dumbledore is like the Emperor. Like, I can't shake that vibe, and he's not. Like, the Emperor at most should appear to be like in his 40s somewhere, in my opinion, right? But I think something about his geniality, and it becomes very much more apparent to me anyway, that he's some kind of British, right? He doesn't have to be like UK British. He could be, Indian or whatever. Like, his propensity for tea and a few other things, I feel like are a little bit of a tell. But it's like, I just can't not see Dumbledore there.
Right.
And so, like, by extension,
everyone has a British accent. Different kinds of British accents, but everyone's British.
Well, I have not seen that much to the Emperor yet. Only the last bit of the first one and a little bit at the start where he talks to Harrow through like an intercom and walks with her. Gone to the part where he walks with her and show her, here are people I resurrected 10,000 years ago are frozen. I can send them to the 9th.
Right. Spoilers. So,
hey, why don't you go down to the planet and bring some of those people back? See, I haven't even started this book yet.
And the restore your house thing becomes semi-important to me from a world building perspective, because it proves that the 8th is up in the night as far as the 9th should have died, right? If the 9th should have died, the Emperor would say something about like, oh, you people shouldn't even be there, that sucks. Instead, he's like, here are several hundred cryogenically frozen people that I've been saving just in case. Yeah. And I'm going to send them to restore your house. But that's next time. But the tea thing I should drill into, like, the author is lived in New Zealand, born in Australia. So, they're part of
but
the
she's
Commonwealth
currently living
and
in
all of that.
Oxford.
Yeah, I was just being transparent that like that's probably why everybody's British, because
So everyone should be smoking pipe weed, is what you're saying.
I
Sure.
get this impression that the Emperor's he's just kind of a little. He's 10,000 years old. He's just kind of forgotten the basics of being human, since he's kind of this god emperor.
Yeah, we'll see.
Spoilers, yeah.
I was gonna say, based on that conversation, he seems like he gets what it still means to be human pretty well. He's just really should be more hands-on with some things.
Hmm.
You keep humming all you want. I'm gonna. I have a digital copy, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna find a way to throw this book at you.
Like
fair.
if you download it to the Kindle and then throw it at her, that might be more effective. But,
You know what? I'll spend our funds to buy a Kindle and then throw it at you.
oh, how magnanimous.
Okay, so
Okay, let's continue.
where were we?
Mhm.
The keys and everybody's in
Right.
fighting, and
Judith is trying to enforce authority that no one is listening to. And teacher says, like, I do not know where you get the idea that you get to be in charge now, but you can suffer under your own delusions. And they're trying, there is definitely a key that is missing and probably hidden on the bodies of Magnus and Abigail, but they can't find it. So Judith goes and looks for it, sees nothing. Sextus does more of an investigation, and he has a background in medical necromancy, so he's able to put more things together. And he says that they were killed by something with a lot of different bone signatures. They are coming from different sources, which does make sense eventually, but it makes Isaac Tedros to think that maybe it was Nona Gesimus that did it because she's with the bones, or maybe it was the skeleton servings that's going all around, because there's 3 people who look human in the first house for the past 10,000 years, and everyone else is a skeleton.
I love how the skeletons apparently are just completely, pretty much lucid, intelligent beings in the house there.
yeah.
And how the six is like, I went up and asked for his bone thing, and he was quite a nice guy. Couldn't really write anymore. He kind of forgot that, but other than that,
Let's see. Is when Protezalaus disappears, Judas says there's been another murder. Essentially, this might have been when they also found that there's bodies in the incinerator. Whose bodies? I'm not sure, but there's 2 people based on necromantic signatures, and they've been dead for several more weeks than people have actually been on the planet. So how was there a body there that none of the time signatures make sense? And
wasn't only one of them dead more, and the other one had died fairly recently?
No, they died
I thought
pretty
so.
much the same time, and it was
I thought
longer than
because
they've been on the planet.
Yeah. Because it gets explained later. I'd have to reread the passage, but yeah, because it gets explained later. Like I thought she was keeping Dulcinea around, and then
That's what I thought too.
spoilers. And then once people started twigging to what was going on, she was a liability and got rid of her and the body. So
No, they died at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, within a few hours of each other, because she had to get a bunch of information.
Okay,
All right, so people do not think that the 6th house has very formidable warriors, which is hilarious in the fact that Camilla is the most formidable warrior on this planet, and Judith.
except Gideon.
No, Camilla could kick her ass.
I don't know. It's not settled. They didn't fight.
Camilla could kick her ass. I'm just saying.
I will. So at the hugest spoiler so far, Ben, plug your ears. Just kidding. But seriously, big spoilers. Let's just measure the output. One of them is still alive, and the other one isn't. So,
Well,
Are we counting that as alive?
Camilla's alive.
They both would
yeah,
have been.
right.
Yeah,
Like-
Camilla is alive.
So
They both would have been
extra
dead.
spoilers. Camilla's still alive. So
Yeah. Right.
look, man, classic tropes. If the bodies are not present and accounted for, especially among fucking necromancers, they're still alive.
Ones that can't
So-
raise the dead? No. These are not. These are shit necromancers.
Yeah.
If
don't
you-
get to
if
see
you had
all
told
of the
me-
magic in the book.
If you told me Gravane was there, I would have been like, yeah, sure.
Right.
Not these
how
fuckers.
gross and visceral the combat is, by the way, when they use necromancy to fight with, and there are different flavors of necromancy.
It's so cool. I mean, this is the anime part of my brain, just like the reference to Bleach. It's like, yeah, it's those things. Isn't it so cool?
You
but
make me
Judith-
almost want to watch Bleach, which is terrible.
Don't
but
watch Bleach.
Thank you.
Just-
Thank you.
Go into
Thank
it
you for
with thinking
saving
that
me.
you are a 12-year-old boy and
He is.
stop after
am
a
a
certain
12-year-old.
point. It's
Oh,
it's
okay.
fine. It's just the basic shonen. with
There are
dead
so
people.
many better shonens and so many better animes we could just into watching fucking Bleach.
I mean,
I understood some of those words.
but I mean, at some point, his kid's going to be the right age, and he can watch it with them, and they can be all.
Oh, thank you for.
Kristen's
Again,
kids
they
turn
could
into
be
weebs.
watching
He has
better
failed as a
anime
parent.
than Bleach.
That is undeniable. He resisted the urge only to see his kids fall to the dark side. No, he's gonna have to go get a new family.
Well,
we
and
can-
the worst, the worst part about it is like I can see a lot of this unfolding because of a girl, which could have happened to me if I was just a little bit less stubborn and obstinate myself. But so
Mhm.
that's the worst part about it.
All right. To continue, Judith challenges the sixth house for something or other. Give me your keys at the end, and something or other. And it's the expectation that the sixth house is going to lose because they are generally not known for being warriors. And the cohort of the second house have been fighting since they were children. They know frontline combat. They know that Marta Dias is well renowned for her combat abilities. And so they hop up on a table and then they start fighting. And Plamdius doesn't even really understand the rules of engagement, but it was like basically hyoid down. So from the jawbone down, anything goes, and it ends at the mercy call of the necromancer. So it's deliberately set up to make him cry uncle and to cause as much pain as possible to the necromancer. And Camilla kicks Marta's ass. Marta knows it pretty quickly that she's going to lose. But it's she gets her arm dislocated, and Camilla gets like a slash on her right hand, and Judith calls mercy pretty quickly. Then Sextus is a nice enough guy to put the arm back into place, and then yells at Judith of like, "You started this. You're the one. It was all with the traditional. Like everything has to be by the rules, and you're the one that broke the boundary so bad. Everything's going to go chaotic now. Give me your keys." Right. Judith doesn't have any keys because they haven't done any of the trials. Give me your facility key. But why? You already have one. Give me your fucking keys. It is just like him losing his shit is one of the favorite parts of the book.
Well, and it's funny too here because like again we're following over Gideon's shoulder, and it just occurred to me to circle back again. Like they have a sparring match sequence like earlier in the book, and so you have Gideon basically like narrating the thing, and I don't know why it worked for me. It probably doesn't work for everybody, but like in both sequences, there's a line where it's like, and then I knew who the winner was going to be in the first 3 seconds, and because everyone's expecting little meek Camilla, she looks so old and all of this other stuff. Even though she's only in her mid-20s, and Gideon's like, oh, she's a fighter, like she's gonna kick her fucking ass,
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's
then you see it unfold.
Fell onto the sixth house looking for Harrow, and because she was in the dark, skulking around, all dressed in black, Camilla's like, "You are a bad guy," and they start fighting, and Gideon was losing until Sextus put a stop to it. Gideon was losing.
She was also out of her depth though, right? Like there was a lot to be like. She wasn't expecting it. Obviously, she had Camilla had several really cool like backflips and some other stuff, right? But it was like, yeah, right.
She also was still not rapier proficient.
Right.
Okay.
And it's so. Yeah, if they had been proficient, but if they had been on equal footing to start, but you also find out that that's something that I liked about both characters as well, is both characters are pretending to be cavaliers, so you find out that she like kicks her ass and she's not even, it's like fighting left-handed, right? It's basically like the duel in Princess Bride where it's like, why are you smiling? Because I'm not even using my favorite weapons.
At this duel, when Gideon is watching, Camilla pulls out both the short sword and her rapier at the same time, and that kind of twigs. It's like, oh, so she's ambidextrous and she's used to 2 short swords at the same time. And then they describe later, it's like, why those? I mean, it's boss, but why just those? It's like, well, we did the math, and Sextus said this was probably going to be the most efficient, and so that's what she trained since the age of 12, and that she's good enough with the rapier to be able to fake it, but it's better otherwise.
It's funny because in real life, from what I remember, that's actually not very efficient. Dual wielding swords.
Dual wielding short swords.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure. I gotta.
I was gonna say, I imagine if you have like one long blade and one short one, it's better than.
I don't know. I've seen. I cannot remember the details that well, but there's this guy on YouTube who does like all this weapon stuff,
Yeah, there's a
Chad
bunch of guys like
Burgundy,
that.
I think.
Chad and I think Skalgrim, guys like that.
I think he talked about the whole dual wielding thing and how it's actually not very good or efficient or like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's more if they're the same size, like especially dual wielding two swords, not good. I think if you had like a long sword and maybe a short one, there's
Yeah,
some
and those are frequently
maneuverability
paired.
options there, but I don't know.
Right. So as soon as Camilla wins, Nibirius decides that he's also going to challenge the Sixth House for their keys, but he's being a prig, and so Harrow and Gideon are on the same page for the first time in their life, and they say they will represent the Sixth House, and Nibirius doesn't want to go up against Gideon again because he's a pussy with lip gloss.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
because
because
he knows from their sparring contest that one of them is going to
Right.
play to win.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes important to circle back around too, because like Gideon and Nibirius dueled, right? And he is a very good sword fighter, but he's also very flashy and is proper. Like he's playing by the rules, right? He wins by the rules, and so she basically gets like disarmed during the duel, but then she just beats the shit out of him with her bare hands, and so everyone's like, well, clearly she lost. I win because I disarmed her. That should have been the end of the duel. And I forget who says it, but it's like, oh, she's a fighter. She wasn't playing to win. Like she wasn't playing to win the contest. She was playing to live, and that's why Nibirius didn't want to fight her the second time. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, you won the duel, but she was playing
because she's going to try to kill me if we duel again, And yeah, and Nibirius was being a poacher, right? Because Camilla was wounded from the duel already, so he was going to snap up all of the keys, which is a smart play, but also not very, noble or anything. But
yeah. And there's a spat between Ianthe and Corona Beth of like Corona doesn't want them to fight. She thinks this is bad on her, whatever is going on in her internal line. But Ianthe says she wants to play it out. And this is giving her sister the keys that she doesn't have. Let's get her a facility key. Why not? Mm-hmm. And that's like the tension between them becomes important. And then Nibirius says, I'm not fighting Gideon, whatever, it's hair gel and lip gloss, and I'm walking away. And then it becomes the fourth house, the ninth house, and the sixth house. They're all kind of talking together, except Gideon's still mostly silent about here's how we should break things down. Somebody needs to stay with Dulcinea because she's probably a target, and other people need to go looking for Protezalawis, and that's probably going down to the facility. And Gideon goes with the fourth house to the facility, and sexes Camilla, and Harrow goes stay with Dulcinea for a while. And when asking Gideon her opinion, Sexus is like, come on, you can weigh in on here. And she just says, do you know if you take the first three letters of your last name and the first three letters of your first name, you get sex pal?
Because she's an idiot.
Because she's an idiot, yes. So she's like, this is fine, but that's what she focuses on when she talks. Yeah. And the teenagers are looking at her like, are you serious?
Right. Yeah, and we glossed over there's a big what to do in those first 5 chapters that Ben made it through. So Ben does get this reference, but about all of her naughty magazines and things like that. And that basically, like, even in the ninth house, they think she's a degenerate, right? So it's just like, she's the only one other than Ortis that can hold a sword is the problem, Yeah. And I guess Iglamine, but, she's got a gimpy leg.
Yeah, yes, Iglamine is the one that teaches.
So it's just a wrong sword. Allegedly.
Exactly.
Which apparently doesn't really matter. Like all the prim and properness actually didn't really matter at any point.
Go figure. Because again, if somebody had just played down another instruction or two, this might not have
well, and it's kind of funny too, because like they're so disparaging in their first couple of chapters and everything, but by the time you get to the end, they finally start telling the truth that it's like she really is probably the best sword fighter that they've produced since, Matthias, right? Nani or whatever.
Matthias Nonius.
Yeah. So the truth kind of comes out that it's like the ninth house, like, and you get this throughout the book. It's like they're all secretive nuns and they're just shadows and creeps because they're the only ones that wear the skull masks and, like the makeup, they're doing the Day of the Dead thing and all of this other stuff. And so everybody's just like, what necromancers check their bed for before they go to sleep? Not ghosts and skeletons, but these guys, the ninth house, they're the creeps and the weirdos, But you kind of find out it's like, oh yeah, actually she is a badass, but she's also so arrogant and stupid that if we had told her that, she would have never tried, or whatever. But
Yes, she is an idiot. She's not. I mean, the idiocy is like everyone around her is a genius, and so she's kind of carried along in terms of the problem solving. She has the basic understanding of like everything is about the necromancer and the cavalier. That's pretty obvious, but it's just like the basics of it are very penetrating to her. But she is very much an idiot, and so everything's filtered through that.
And also to separate it, like she's really good at fighting, right? She's just super drilled into what her specialty is. So yeah, compared to like Palamides and Nonagesimus, it's just like no, there's just she is not on their level whatsoever. But when it's a fight, she was one of the best there. So
yeah, I mean, she's kind of the epitome of street smarts, not book smarts, but also with really no street smarts.
yeah.
Like she just I go that way.
Yes, there's swords. There's there's a thing to fight. That's where everything comes in.
Swords, hot girls. Okay, we're good. We're good. Food, yes.
And why she prefers a two-hander over a rapier, because the best way to defeat your enemy is through. There's no over, under, around. It's through. It's always through.
No, she doesn't have to think about the other hand maybe hitting her in the back of the head or anything. It's like, why are you betraying me?
I get the impression that this whole everything on their wonder on this planet, they're all kind of self-sufficient, and they take care of all the food. And some of the houses were more like this is kind of whatever food. And Gideon, she's just like, this is great. Like we get fucking shit at the ninth. That's all I've ever known. This fish is
which
awesome.
Again is like, how did you get so big eating food of this kind?
It's mostly oatmeal and snow leeks, whatever a snow leek is.
Yeah, whatever. It's mythical muscle building.
Yeah, it's not meant for pleasure. It is meant to keep people alive, barely. Versus,
I mean, to be fair, the shit they would eat on the Nebuchadnezzar, it's just like all nutrients, and it looked like a bowl of snot. But half those guys look jacked, so I guess
that is a reference that she would probably use. So yes. And then versus, of course, Nibirius of like, oh, the food is awful just because he has to be upset about something. But when Gideon goes down to the facility with the bad teens, as she cares about them more, her epithets of how horrible they are gets less and less. Like they're horrible, annoying teenagers. Now they're just bad. And there's
which is how you knew they were doomed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
There's a monster.
Oh, I'm really starting to like these guys. And then, so.
And then this book happened to be one of the only times I can really remember reading something about teenagers in a book. And like that really captured what I remember of being a teen, of like the way they just, no, Magnus, don't say that thing. Don't tell that story. Don't mention me. And that's like, I remember acting like that to my dad. It's both, it captured what it was like, but it wasn't actually grating or annoying to me, which is very rare because I usually dislike teenagers in all fiction.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see, to bring it back to anime, and they like kind of gray out the character and they're like in their own head, like, oh God, no, don't do that.
Yes.
Vibe. And this also gave me big, what was it? Tamsyn twins energy, the ones that got eaten by the ghouls in Camp Kaboom.
Oh, yeah.
We got to see if we can get her on the show just so you guys can ask her what her favorite anime is and put this to bed. And I honestly will want her to come back with what's an anime or something, because you guys are so sure on the tropes. But
what, the author?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Listen, these tropes intersect. It's not whether or not they were conscious; they are there. They can't be helped. I mean, come on. This is absolutely a bunch of fucking 9 houses of space necromancers. This is anime written all over it.
And a fixation on tits.
Yeah, that's that. Fan service. Fan service, it's called. Thank you.
But this book is anime written. It's like, I don't know, it's all the things that I enjoy. It's the weird anime, the weird, the creepy, grimdark aesthetic, and damaged people all at once. But down in the facility, the fourth house, there's a monster, and it says death to the fourth house up at the top, and it's all creepy, and Isaac kabooms himself in front of it to try to get them to go away. And so Gideon takes Jean-Marie and runs to the best place that she can think of, which is actually pretty good, of where there's the literal lab that she is the only one with the key to it. It should be safe. and they're damaged and they fall asleep, and Gideon wakes up and Jean Marie is dead.
Oops.
Like a lot. Like
Oh,
she
I
was a
did.
pincushion, wasn't she?
Yeah, there was like things, gigantic bits of bone that had stabbed her through into a bed, and then on the wall was written "Sweet Dreams."
Right.
Yeah, very
Dick.
gothic.
I mean, that was definitely one of the more horrific scenes, like in sequences to me in the book, because it was like it had all the classic, tropes, right? Isaac was like, a shining ball of like, I'm just gonna fuck this thing up with all of my power, and unleashes, for lack of a better word, his death curse on the thing, which does nothing because it's made of regenerating ash, which Nana Gessimus has worked out, and so you start to hear more and more about what's going on with that. Gideon takes them to what is obviously a safe space, safe enough that she falls asleep just to wake up to find out that somebody's murdered this person under her ward in the room, and just like, oh God, and possibly minutes ago. Like, it seemed like she had not fallen asleep for very long comparatively. And, it's just crazy. So
they mostly had passed out of, the trauma of having just seen another person that they love die. And they probably haven't slept in the past 2 days.
Right.
And when Harrow shows up, Gideon, is it funny to look at it in retrospect, because Gideon hears Harrow says, "You imbecile, you dullard, you nincompoop, you didn't figure this out." And was actually, Harrow was talking to herself because she bet on the wrong side as to what was going to happen. But Gideon thinks that Harrow is being cruel to her, like always. And then at
Very
various...
narcissistic.
Yeah. It should have made sense when she used nincompoop with all the other ones that she was talking to herself. Now that
It's a very tame word by comparison.
Yeah, because they are absolutely vile to each other through most of the book. So
it's new from I had like this hate to lovers or hate to friendship, wherever it's going. It'd be kind of weird if it's to lovers, because it seems like they're basically siblings.
Did you not read the book? Are you unclear exactly about what happened? Because it's going to be a lot more clear in the second book. But I'm just saying,
they made up. They become...
Did you read the one-liner the director talked about, like the primer or whatever? Like, what's this book about? And it's like, lesbian necromancers locked in a haunted building.
Lesbian necromancers explore.
Who did you think the lesbians were?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah, right. Palamides is, of course, the most in love with women out of everybody. But like,
I was going to say, he's the only one who was asexual, I think.
Like,
there is an asexual, but
Gideon's got the hots for the twin sister.
Gideon's got the hots for anything with moves.
Because she's the lesbian. Like, almost all of the cohort necromancer pairs are, heterosexual, with like 2 exceptions that come to mind, right?
So who did you think it was? The exceptions are the people who aren't queer. So is everyone a lesbian? Well, I'd say everyone is attracted to women. Everyone.
Which is okay.
Well, yeah, everyone's attracted to women. Like, they're the prettiest, like, obviously.
Yeah.
And then they do the DBZ fusion technique.
No, this is an anime. I did not get love from Gideon and Harrow, and hope it doesn't.
No. There was.
Did you
going
skip
to be?
I guess familial love. Sure.
Did you skip the scene where they kissed?
Yeah, I guess, because I did not. I don't remember that.
Or do you kiss your sisters? Like, I'm just.
When did they kiss?
Yeah,
they were in the pool.
No,
yeah,
she was hugging her. I don't think they kissed.
Yeah, they didn't kiss.
I'm pretty sure they kissed. Like,
Gideon and Harrow will never be sexual.
Well, not anymore.
That's
Of course.
It's going to take way too long to find this, but all right, hold on.
They have a sibling relationship.
Control F pool.
Yeah, I am doing that because that might be somewhat quicker, but
or you could do kiss. That would
possibly. Mostly, I had to find a place that I could search the book in on Amazon, but
I mean,
it is also, while you look at that, a thought I had. So the Lictor's monster is what's the
hold on, no. Okay, so Gideon pressed her mouth to the place where Harrow's nose met the bone of her frontal sinus, and the sound that Harrow made embarrassed them both. So she kissed her forehead.
Well, there was that too, but was that the pool?
Yes, that was at the pool. That was right when Gideon says, "Too many words. How about these? One flesh, one end, bitch."
Right. I mean, there's also that, but come on, like that's not fucking suggestive. So
no, it's not.
One of the other
sexual.
Okay, shh. Like you could say whatever you want, but the fact is that their relationship was getting to that point. Whether or not non-Agesimus fully like, and it also doesn't have to be sexual. We're talking about love, right? Like that could be expressed however it wants. You cannot tell me for one single fucking instant that you have read the second book and that you think that there isn't love there. Like,
there's absolutely love there.
They don't need to bang. That's not what I was saying.
Okay,
so, but I was saying, if we're going to take the line that, you know, there are lesbian necromancers locked in a tomb, who the fuck do you think the lesbians were?
Everyone.
Because you weren't. No. Yeah. So anyway,
because
Gideon definitely softens. Like there's another line here. I'm trying to remember what the context was, but it was like, you know, Gideon could have kissed her. Obviously that could be excitement. Obviously Gideon's going to be the more sexual creature out of the two of them so far. But like, you can't just sit there and tell me that there wasn't anything happening, especially at the end of the book and especially in the context of the second book. So
I mean, I haven't got that point in the second book. Nothing in the first book made me think that it was romantic love. Just like they grew closer as
well. Feel free to split that hair for me then once you get the second book done, because I'm not sure what the difference is. Like, look, I am absolutely the slowest. Like, to contextualize this for myself, I'm the slowest to tell you that two characters that are same sex are anything other than platonic. Right? Like there a number of examples in some other fiction that I've read where it's like these two are best bros. This guy literally just tried to kill himself to go back in time to save his best bro. Like that kind of thing, up until the point where it's basically like they are, you know, holding hands or kissing or whatever the level of intimacy is here. But like by the end of the book, I feel like it's very clear, you know, that they were no longer platonic with each other. Like, I'm just saying.
Right. It's the love that they have. It's more than platonic. It doesn't mean romantic or sexual. That it's very strange that Abigail and Magnus were married.
Because all of that's taboo, but
yes,
that doesn't matter to them either, though. Like certainly it doesn't matter to Gideon.
If it's romantic or sexual, it's really weird to me because they grew up together.
Yeah, I mean, but so did Harry.
I think you're putting
a lot of standards.
Right, exactly. I think you're putting a lot of extra weirdness in there so Gideon Nav is not even technically, she's not from the same genetic stock of the ninth house, let alone is she not a sibling. She's a foundling. She was not from the ninth house. They don't know where she came from, which is one of the fucking mysteries that I want them to solve. But you know, like, yeah, I see your smile. I'm watching your face.
House, but whatever.
It might. I get possible, it. I get why, because it sounds like it's sort of like a Woody Allen stepdaughter situation,
where there's the same age,
no blood relation. Basically. Well, sure, but there's no blood relation, but there's still a kind of close knit family tie. Is that what's going on?
Well,
except for the fact that they fucking hated each other. Like, what are you putting on them? Like.
I'm just trying to interpret what you're
not you particularly. I'm trying to figure out Andreas. Like,
if I were to try to put what his statement is in different words, is like, as an example, people who grow up in kibbutz in Israel, they tend to not want to pair up with each other inside the same kibbutz. They go to the other ones. They're all growing up in a group, and they do tend to have more of a sibling association with each other just because of that, and so a tendency to not pair up with the person that they just grew up with.
And yeah, so I get the.
That's not a reference I can follow, but
up until the point where they split because the parents kill themselves and Gideon blames herself and
spoilers.
We have to finish this episode at some point.
If we get off of that, we'll get there.
We're arguing about the most obvious plot point of these two being a couple, and somehow half of us don't understand that.
Right. Well, and especially because, like, at some point, I'd like to get into the fact that apparently non-Agesimus has to be asexual. Like, where was that written?
She's not.
Okay, so who's the asexual one that you're referring to?
Oh, I said Sextus.
Second book.
Whatever. Okay. I'm like 400 pages
She could
into
be
the second
bisexual,
book.
that would
Is
be
it
fine.
covered at that point?
Well,
or-
Ortis and both Ortises, I'll say.
Yes.
I don't know how to
Okay,
start
look.
this.
Don't make me fucking get EG's like template out, because Ortis the First is not sexless either. All right.
Well, you pretty
So-
much. I mean, like there was a whole
No,
conversation.
No, please don't make me argue and justify this. But you're wrong. Please don't make me argue and justify
Shouldn't we be
this.
saving this for the second book because nobody's read it yet? Well, I
Yes.
haven't read it yet.
I'm
You'll
like
see.
80 or 90%
You will
done.
see.
So, yeah. No.
You've got 100 pages left. There's a lot of shit happens in that 100 pages.
Yes, there's goddamn better be, because there's so much to wrap up in 100 pages. It's pissing me off.
And you know what happens in these pages? They were going to become a couple, and then one of them.
Yeah,
died.
it was like nothing, right? Yeah, nothing happens. Like I'm so like it's such a weird place to be, because these are not particularly my favorite books. I'll go on the record as saying that, right? But I can't not know the answers at the same time. So yeah. Anyway, let's get on track. There was kissing. She freaking kissed her.
No.
I am disconcerted by the lack, by the way, of boner jokes, considering their necromancy.
It
She's
was
literally
several.
a
That's
bone
what she
mancer.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing. There was a little bit of this. I was like, you clearly wrote this for people of now, and I'm supposed to believe these are space necromancers. Please don't say the line, "That's what she said," or things to that effect.
She very openly uses memes that these people would not ever know. Like,
Yeah,
Gideon
it's
makes
like, no.
references to having pizza face, but
I was led to believe
she probably
this was
doesn't know what
Dune
pizza is.
and Warhammer put together, and you're giving me like vernacular I would use.
So you're telling me in a place that's almost like 90% clearly our own solar system that died and was reborn and has basically been stagnant for 10,000 years, they wouldn't have the same memes? Is that what you're telling me?
After
That's
10,000
the
years, they
question
would
I
have
had.
different memes.
It's the first.
The ninth house wouldn't.
It's the,
So-
planet
I was gonna say she's probably still got Playboys from the 70s. That's what she's reading.
Is that
Right.
the-
So
Frontline
so
titties of the fifth.
so this is actually something I can talk about, because this is something that annoyed me, and I had something to say about it.
Oh,
You guys
Skin
are getting
Mag.
into- you guys are getting into the nitty gritty, so I thought I'll just
This
let
is
you guys
the
get
nitty-gritty.
Imagine
Okay.
that.
do it.
You were
This is
getting
the
the nitty gritty.
nitty-gritty.
No, this is
Let's do it.
So
Let's do it.
so the whole thing, I get that the author is doing that whole thing with the meme culture stuff. It works in something like the Dresden Files because the setting is the urban fantasy. It's set in the real world, kind of. Just twisted a little. But this is supposed to be like a radically different setting. So the imagination, there should be some kind of immersion into that world. How would these crazy space necromancers talk and think, and what maybe they would have their own memes, but you could build that into the setting. But if it's just like a fourth wall break, it's sort of like going to a stage play and then having halfway through the actor wink at the audience, and rather than being immersed, it's just complete fourth wall break for me. That was one of the things that
I feel you. I mean, I don't mind it so much, but I do like when the worlds are more immersive, and don't do that when it's something that's
Right.
so different from our world.
It
Uh,
varies
but I do
based
not
on the person.
understand
Gideon
how-
is going to do much more of the memes more than anyone else. A lot of
Oh, yeah, for
Harrow
sure.
and Sextus, they are in the world vernacular, not in Gideon's meme culture.
But I think part of it was just like, okay, you, the reader, are following this person, so we're going to make it as understandable for you as possible, and we're just going to put some weird TikTok person in you, and that's who you're going to follow, so that you get it. It's like you can trust the audience a little more. I believe in you.
I think it's also just it's on the level of anime reference type fun. Grumble, grumble. All right, so
Finish.
anime references work on a very professional podcast like ours, set in the present day. But grim, dark space future necromancy, ladies.
I thought it worked. I quite enjoyed
Okay.
it, and I
Well, I'm
maybe
glad
it's
you
just
enjoyed
because I got the references instead of with Dresden and every other one about what the fuck is that?
You
It's-
got the
it's
references,
just-
just not the
one
glaring
thing
signpost that
it's
says these
just-
two are going to hook up.
Unreal to me is how much of this works for you that me and Justin and to a lesser extent I think Ben and EG enjoying other media where you're just like, no, this is terrible.
I have explained this point several times. There is a difference in quality
You
of
haven't
the
done it on
direction.
here.
Gideon is an idiot, and she embraces it, and that like she's never trying to say I'm better than you because a joke, and I feel like that way too much out of Joss Whedon and anything of the like of it. So it's that false of like I get the correct thought, and you're in with me, and we're all on the same side, and we're better than all those motherfucktards. I don't like that. But Gideon saying, "Did you know that your name makes sex pal?" That's hilarious to me because it's bad, and it's I know it's kind of weird and bad of the fact that a bad joke is funny, but that's what it is.
I mean, bad jokes can be funny.
Exactly, and that's what Gideon is particular about. That
isn't Ben's point something you would usually agree with?
I don't know. It depends. It depends on its execution.
Which clearly this one is the greatest.
Yeah, it's quite enjoyed.
Well, I mean, imagine you're watching Dune, and halfway through Dune, Timothée Chalamet looks direct at the camera and says, "Groovy," or something like that.
Right, no, it doesn't fit Dune.
Because
that is not
Dune
the
was written
purpose
in
of Dune.
I don't think
But
we
that
can
is
pull
part of the
off.
purpose of this book.
But I think what's his face? Jason Momoa's character probably could have done that.
Well, here's something that actually, when I first read the Dune books, I stopped halfway through Messiah because literally the perspective character effectively looks direct at the reader and says, "And I saw Hitler, and I understood something about human social structures," something like that. Literally name dropping Hitler, and then another. I guess that's like, I was in this.
I've never read this.
It's set in the real universe, sort of, but it's not. You know, it's supposed to be a little bit far. I get that he's prescient. I guess that this would be a consequence potentially, but it just felt it dropped into the book like a lead balloon.
If I remember that conversation correctly, Paul was talking about historical events.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's not the sort of thing that you've come to if you read, if you're just reading through from start to finish in Dune. It's not the sort of thing that I thought was particularly well woven in. There's another one. The Once and Future King does a similar thing, literally talking about Hitler again.
Literally Hitler.
And that's an Arthurian legend, which, if you think about it, it's supposed to make sense because in that book, Merlin ages backwards. He's born at the end of time and gets older, going backwards through time. So he lived through Hitler backwards.
Well, he's
so he'll remember. So,
and he's an idiot. He did it the wrong way. He's supposed to go the other way.
So which is the kind of the whimsy of the book. But when you start having this, the setting, there's then you name drop the real thing. I think it prevents the message from being as effective because it's a lot more didactic than kind of artfully woven into the moral atmosphere of the series. So
right, and I do think that there's a difference between naming Hitler versus that's what she said. That is still true. Something that's in parlance.
Yeah, at least the Hitler thing is supposed to have some thematic relevance. This is sort of for the meme, right? That's what it's literally for the meme, for the enjoyment. If you like the memes, and I get that the author's deliberately doing this and doesn't care if people don't like it. That's fine. I personally didn't like it. It was one of the obstacles to enjoying the book for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we're going to continue talking about this book that you didn't like.
I'm just understandable.
How dare you?
You are welcome to keep talking about it. I'm just chiming in. I'm a different perspective, and
I think that your perspective is like there's people who either love it or hate it, and there's probably people on the side of it, they just like the memes, they want something else, and that's fine. For some reason, I read this and it was extremely refreshing and exciting and funny, and it has all the things in it that I like.
I thought the humor was, it was okay and it was funny, and I was fine with it. I would say the strength of the book for me was the world was like really, I was really into the world and those kind of things behind them. The characters were pretty decent, but the plot in the first book is like pretty weak. Don't love it.
Locked room murder mystery.
Yeah, I don't know. The start of the book is pretty weak. I think in the first book especially, like I don't know if it's because of the perspective we have or what. I think the author is very excited to have a thesaurus and an encyclopedia and a dictionary as she's writing. Like there were so many words that I was like, I'm roughly familiar with this, but I'm going to look it up just to make sure. And almost all of the characters, like 80% or more, are named after some other mythological instance, and they're given very on the nose names, right? Where the author is basically taunting you with the mystery the entire time, but like when all of the cards and the chips are down, it's a pretty good book, right? But it takes a while to get there. It's not my favorite. It's chaotic as all hell at times. I There are either things that I don't understand, or there are definitely gaps, and like retcon's not quite the right word, but there are definitely things that don't seem to line up. But it's pretty good at the end of the day. So
a lot of the answers are not solved in this book. A lot more of them are solved
Right.
and told you in the second book, and even more probably in the third.
And I swear to God, this pun better be worth it. I've never read 2 books for a pun before, so you're on the hook, like in a big way.
This is the best I've ever seen. If it isn't worth
Wow.
it, then I don't know. But
I'm standing right here, sitting, as a matter of fact. Like, you can't just say that the best pun you've ever seen. We'll see. But
we'll see. All right. So to continue, because we're this much through.
way off. Yeah.
way off. Yeah. So there is a discussion of some of the things that matter of the necromancer and cavalier in this aftermath of Jean Marie's death. They kind of just stuck Gideon in a room with Dulcinea, and they start talking, and Dulcinea's like, whatever happened to one flesh, one end, now that she is cavalierless? And Gideon had seen this on a scrap of flimsy that was 10,000 years old, G and P, one flesh, one end. And what does that mean? And well, you should have said that to your necromancer when you were bound to each other. It's one of those important oath-taking things that they did. But because Harrow and Gideon are not normal, they deviated from everything that is normal about necromancer and cavalier. They never actually did that. Let's see. And then Sextus shows up and he acts all weird, and Gideon leaves. And there's fighting between Gideon and Harrow, and eventually Harrow says, like, you're not allowed to be around Dulcinea ever again because you're a complete ninny, and she is dangerous, and don't trust her. And Gideon runs into the 8th house at one point, and Colum Ashtes, my uncle, because they're weird uncle-nephew thing, requests to take tea with you without your necromancer. It's like, that's really weird, and you guys are weird, and why are you the color of mayo? But Silas says things that are particularly insulting, and says Gideon Nav. No one else knows her last name, except that Ortis and his mother had left the 9th house when they thought they were going to have to go to the first house planet, and supposedly made it back to the 8th house because that's where she was from, and spilled some beans about like Gideon Nav and all of how they're not normal and they're not doing the traditional thing, and everything. The game is up and is about to reveal everything.
The monster in the basement thing that's controlled by the first lector. That's kind of the biggest threat, and she's the biggest threat. What was the teacher so worried about? Was he just instilled with the fear because he's not supposed to go down there?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
The planet is dangerous. There are necromantic things that they're not explaining, that if Colum leaves his body, as Silas does to him, to siphon from him, something can take its place, and it's extremely dangerous. It could happen ever, but that planet is haunted.
Right. Well, and specifically the laboratory, right, was supposed to be full of like ravenous ghosts, right?
Yes.
So,
but it seems to be only in the trials, and everything else seemed fine.
Well, because the way the laboratory was designed, I think it was locked in there. But to take something that gets expounded upon much, much more in the second book, it's, to me, now that we're talking about it, it seems like it's very possible that laboratory is close to the river. So that's either going to make sense or it didn't. But, once you kind of get into it.
Sorry, book 2, but I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah,
they'll go into it a lot more in depth, but basically it's a subdimension, where all the ghosts live, and they liken it.
Kind of figured.
Yeah, they liken it as a river, but at the same time, it seems like the river goes everywhere, and there are a lot of other things that, to me, don't line up with the mythology of it. But it seems like it's very clear that it's a subdimension, but it's entirely possible that the laboratory is built on the border, from some of the stuff that we live. or sorry, that we learn in the second book. But or it's not, or it's just a bottle full of crazy ghosts, like 13th Ghost, if you like really bad good horror movies. So I love that.
Is it
movie.
bad or is
Don't
it
judge
good?
me. It's bad, but it's good. I don't know. It's like,
Is it like the humor in
Yeah.
this book?
no, I don't remember anything being particularly humorous, but it's like, they're just like 13 murderous ghosts that get loose in this mad magician's mansion, and then people have got to try and survive it. And it's not like amazing, but it's pretty good. I like it.
All right.
So-
I mean, I don't think you're wrong with your comparisons. I always assumed that that's the facility, the sub-basement is where the work had been performed.
Right.
And so it left its mark. But we'll probably find out a little bit more of that. And particularly, I mean, Teacher is meant to be afraid of it, and he's afraid of the whole place. He hates the building. It's haunted. It doesn't go after him and the other priests, but it's dangerous, and he knows it.
Yeah, and I think some of the extra spoilers there for when we get to it is like, it's entirely possible the Teacher's afraid of it because that's where he was made. So
Yes.
yeah.
Where the work was done. Yes. So there's another couple of times when Harrow and Sextus team up of trying to get through a door. There's one that's been blocked by perpetual ash, and so they have to break it off, but Harrow doesn't quite have enough energy to do it alone. And so Gideon says, saddle up Sunshine and do the siphoning thing again. Now that she knows what it is, this is a way that she can be helpful. And so but Sextus says, don't do it because it's not good theory and it's not good morals, because he is a better person. Then there was the fight with Gideon and Hera about don't go see Septimus, and it gets quite nasty. And Hera says, go take a nap. But the last time Gideon napped, Jean-Marie died. And so fuck you, I'm betraying you. And Gideon goes and has tea with Silas Octokizaron and learns some things. The fact that Ortis and his mother had actually died, and Silas had spoken to their ghosts, or at least for Sister Glorica. And that's how he started getting information about Gideon Nav, and the understandings that there had been 200 babies in the crush, and then all of them died just before Hera was born. And that was significant. And he believes correctly that the house had murdered all of the babies from the age of 18 down to do something horrible with it. And they are horrible because they didn't die 9,000, 10,000 years ago when there was a tomb, and they should have just locked it and left. And then Silas wants to take the keys away from Gideon again, but she refuses. And Silas and Colum have an argument about picking and choosing decencies. And they get a hint of all of the things that Colum had to go through, and the fact that they were waiting for Silas to be born in whatever genetic program that they have. There was 3 brothers, all with different blood types, because they weren't sure what he was going to be. And that's one of the reasons why Colum is so much older than his uncle. So whatever genetic program they're doing. And Silas also does things like, your oaths need not be wasted on the faithless liars of the 9th house. It's like what he considers to be good and moral. He doesn't extend it to people who are not worth it. And Gideon tries to find more information of what's going on. She's wandering around. She feels kind of scared of Harrow, not understanding what happened to all of the things that she'd been told growing up. She sees weird moments between Corona Beth and Nibirius, because Corona was in the training room and wanted to fight Gideon and was starting to. And then Nibirius shows up and says, drop it. I won't tell her, drop the sword. And he's ignoring Gideon entirely. And Corona is biting him out of her own frustration and drawing blood, because they're weird that way. Gideon goes back to the rooms with Harrow and starts rummaging around the closet, because she might as well do up the buttons on the wrong side of the shirt and whatnot, and finds a box. And that box was carefully sort of tried to be hidden, and it has a head in it. It has Protozoolaris' head. And now she thinks that Harrow murdered him and hid the body. And this ties in with what Silas was saying, and therefore Harrow is a monster, and Gideon takes it and goes to Sextus and reveals that Gideon always knew that why Harrow hated her, and it's because Gideon killed Harrow's parents. Sort of.
Yeah, there we that story finally, and it's like, well, obviously didn't like he says, obviously didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, she caused it, and so Harrow, at some point of the age of 10, had decided she wanted to open the door that was denied her, and so she breaks into the locked tomb, and Gideon rats on her, and an hour later, Harrow's parents were dead, and that's why Harrow was puppeting them around for the past 7 years to try to give off the idea that they were still alive. And they don't say it, but I'm assuming because if Priamhark and Peliamina were considered dead, then Harrow as underage would probably be then taken over by another regent, and the independence of the ninth house would have been gone. And she cares very much about the independence of the ninth house. Sextus talks to Gideon and says, "You're not responsible. You, an 11-year-old, did not cause their deaths. You might have triggered it. You're not responsible for it. And obviously you don't need that to be told to you, but she's an idiot, and she does." Camilla goes and gets Harrow, and then they all go talk to Septimus of, well, how is Protesilaus dead? And he has been dead for weeks because Sextus knows of the way that he does the time signatures. And she tells a story of he had died in an accident, and she still needed to get onto the planet. And so people were doing the beguiling corpse, her and supposedly, and many others from the planet of the seventh, to keep him up and moving around in a zombie fashion. This also explains why he didn't ever use his sword. He just got up and punched something. He moved like a sleepwalker. And as they leave that, and Dulcinea is still dying, that's when
Perpetually.
Yes, exactly, perpetually. Harrow decides to actually start telling everything to Gideon, and they go to the pool that had been filled up in the training room. She locks the doors with skeletons. Why else? And this was the rule that her mother had. If you're going to talk about this secret, you have to be in saltwater. So they get in the saltwater pool, and she starts telling that they have a secret. They have to keep the line of the necromancers continuous, but with both her parents being necromancers, it was very hard for them to conceive a child, and the child had to be a necromancer. They couldn't be anything else of their bloodline. And so they killed 200 children to be able to use that Thanergy bloom to make the child that was Harrow a necromancer and to survive until the end of the birth, to survive at all. That's why she was considered the golden child of the ninth house. And they were afraid of Gideon. She was mistreated so much because she took 10 minutes of horrible organophosphates that put the great aunts blind just for being exposed to it for a couple of seconds. 10 minutes of that full in the face as an infant, and she didn't die. That's why they were terrified of her and beat her so badly.
To her specialness that we don't get resolved in that book.
Not in this book, no.
Or any book ever.
It will be.
Yeah.
You'll see. And
100 pages. There's a lot to fucking fix in 100 pages. So
you will see.
Yeah. Like I'm right in what I would imagine is the climax of the book, honestly, and it's just like
I don't know. Andreas read those
much,
100 pages and he said it was terrible, so I'm really not on board with this. I think I'm gonna skip it. I thought you did. I thought you said you didn't like it.
I said I started.
He hasn't started book 2.
Oh, so you're in the same boat as me.
I started the second book, and it's like this. The second book has second point of view, however you say it. Like it's like you did this. I hate it.
Right.
You get used to it.
It's
you get Stockholm syndrome.
It's important. It's important to the narrative, and you really should figure that out. But you will, hopefully, and then if you still haven't, they'll explain it to you. But
it is important. And honestly, because it's you being Harrow, my brain kind of just started translating it all to being third person eventually, and I stopped paying attention to it because it wasn't trying to make me, the reader, involved in it. It's you, Harrow, going through things. It's all about Harrow because it's Harrow the Ninth.
Yeah.
Talking to the voices in her head.
Exactly. So as Harrow talking to Gideon in the salt water, she revealed that when she was 10 and she broke into the tomb, she found a body, and it was the corpse of a girl. She was put on ice, and it was the most beautiful thing Harrow had ever seen. And then she decided that she had to live. She had to live forever to see at some point if that person could ever wake up, because she was in love with this dead body. But that was exactly counter to what she had been doing almost immediately before that. She was trying to kill herself, essentially. And then all of a sudden, her parents were dead. She needed to live. And that she needs to be a lictor to save her house. And also, if she's a lictor, she gets to live for presumably forever to see what happens with the body. And she makes Gideon promise that if Harrow dies, Gideon will go back to the ninth house planet and defend the tomb, because that locked tomb is the most important thing to Harrow's life now. And they finally do the full thing of saying the one flesh, one end. And as Gideon had said to Sextus, everyone's talking to me about fleshes and ends today. And it's a dirty joke in there somewhere. Of course there is. But that is the sacred words of the oaths of a necromancer and cavalier to each other. Let's see. They go through into another of the literal labs. Sextus and Harrow and Gideon and Camilla, they decide to create a key that Sextus had examined that currently Octokizaron had and was therefore not going to share to get into this door. And this is when he starts talking about, like, well, there was one of the trials and there wasn't a key there, but there was a tooth. He found the skeleton that had the tooth missing from. He was of middle age when he died. He flossed religiously. He's kind of vitamin deficient, and he couldn't speak. He couldn't write, but he let him take a mold of the clavicle, and that was the key to the tomb to then find that there wasn't anything there for the electro lab. But since he had examined it, he was able to make up one again with kind of merging minds with Harrow for a little bit. But this is when we learn all what's going on with Teacher. There's a cryptic quote of 500 into 50, it is finished. And they start seeing like dots on a wall that are surrounding some of the white ones. And every one of the skeletons, Texas calls it the hideous corpse, I think, instead of the beguiling corpse. They are puppeting themselves. They're not automatons with rules like Harrow would do. They are actual, like they're possessing their own body with some others' bodies there to like help fuel it for a long time. And Teacher in particular had over 100 probably tied to one entity. It was a crazy melange.
But yeah.
And that's what Teacher and the other priests were. And that's what all the skeletons were. That's how they were able to be so precise. They were sentient in the way that automatons cannot be. And then a fire alarm goes off, very conveniently for the plot. And they run out and they see that all of the skeletons are now dead. Or at least they're not moving. They've just tripped over themselves. The thing that functions has turned off. And they trace it down to where the Teacher's room was. And they find that Teacher, Judith, and Marta had fought. Marta is very dead in the fact that her body and her skeleton tried to divorce. And she's a gigantic mess. Judith is still alive, and she thinks that she has saved the day because she killed Teacher. Although he's also saying, you have doomed us all. One has returned, which should not have returned. And then eventually he does die. Judith had called outwards. There was only one comm on the entire Canaan house, and it went to one direction. She could not call the cohort or the seventh house or the fifth house or any of the people who had died. It was straight to the Emperor's flagship. The Emperor himself is coming to Canaan house to save them. She thinks she saved the day. And Hera says, you haven't saved anything. You are going to die confused.
Which is also very, very bad. So
yes.
Which you'll find out even more why specifically it's very bad, but we just know that it's very, very bad right now.
The second can't do anything right.
Yeah, they're the classic, like, going by the rules but otherwise clueless and ham-fisted and stuff. Like, it's funny because when we were going through the houses and what they were for, I was like, oh, these guys are the paladins. Oh, these guys are the paladins. Oh, these guys are the paladins. It's like there are three flavors of bad paladins. So if you're looking for a paladin to be, you could, go with some of these ham-fisted tropes. But like the second house is, the law no matter what. Which is bad and terrible and stupid. The fourth house is like, the last crusade, like daylight charge into the enemy, stupid. And what is it? The eighth house is all the moralizers, right? So it's just like, they're all bad paladin tropes, just so we're clear. The fifth house probably gets it about right. Like I could see Magnus and Michael hanging out.
Oh yeah,
but
Very
he's not an
family
especially good. Yeah, he's not especially good paladin, but he's like for fighting evil and whatever. But he's still
yes.
Just a good
Magnus
guy.
describes himself as he became Cavalier Primary by virtue of being Abigail's husband. So he Cavalier Primaried. And when he loses a bout to Gideon in 3 moves, she's like, "Am I losing my touch? Should Abigail and I divorce?"
Right.
Magnus is probably the closest to a real paladin. The fact that he's just a stand-up guy, but yeah, he's not the best fighter there, and he is okay with that in general. Let's see.
Yeah, he's like a clerk in real life too, isn't he? So that's another thing.
I mean,
like
his function is mostly being a stand-in dad to Jean-Marie and Isaac, and that's mostly what the
right. But I mean,
did.
Yeah.
As they're leaving, the mess of Judith and who's going to die terribly, and she says no necromancer should outlive their cavalier in the most depressing way possible. And the Emperor is coming. Kizron comes up upon Harrow and Sextus and Camilla and Gideon and says, "Someone's defiled the body. The third house has defiled the body of Abigail Pent." And they have to go find out what. Sextus is able to figure out with his psychometry that the key that has been missing that they were looking for was hidden inside Abigail's body, along side to her kidney. And now it's been removed by Ianthe and Naberius, and Cronobeth was there as well. Well, they know exactly where that key opens up. So they go to the door and they all think it's trapped. And then Gideon says, maybe they just didn't give a shit, guys. The key's still in the door. So they walk in and here's some big reveals happening. Ianthe has killed Naberius and become a lictor. She's figured it out without doing any of the trials.
She's eaten Naberius. She didn't just kill him. She ate him.
Yes. She took his soul
Listen,
into her
it
own.
worked for Kravos when Harry ate him, so...
The theory is sound. She took him into her, and now she's going to burn his soul for the end of eternity as a constant, perpetual motion machine of Thanergy. She is going to be forever. But Naberius isn't still happy with this. He's kind of fighting her about it, and she's all twitchy, and her eyes are changing colors, and she's screaming or crying, but also trying to be superior, because she does have a point in the fact they were all floundering together in the trials. She didn't have access to her cavalier. She kind of ignored him and left her sister also up to the side. And she just retroactively put it together backwards as to how the process has to work.
Engineered it. Yeah,
yes,
she reverse engineered becoming a lictor.
Yes.
So when, for the context for everybody else, when you beat the trials, you get a key, you go to the room, and inside the room is a tablet or notes or whatever that teaches them the theorem, which is basically just the spell of what the trial was trying to teach them, right? So in a lot of cases, by trial and error, they had to get in an approximation of it to complete the trial. At least that's how Nonagesimus did it. That's how Harrowheart did it. But then she gets to learn it, right? So when they're fighting that regenerating skeleton, she gets to learn how to do that, which is really fucking good for a bone necromancer, right? When they deal with the grabbing their senses that she had to do to solve that, she gets to know that thing. Ianthe did it without the notes. She just fucking looked at the trials and reverse engineered it. Just talk about brilliance is what you're supposed to get out of it,
Yeah.
So,
she is remarkably brilliant and capable as a necromancer. She has been cheating basically her whole life and having to carry double because
she's been cheating for Coronabeth, which is also kind of important, So she's had to be twice the necromancer because they're twins, and Coronabeth doesn't have any talent,
Yes.
So
everyone sees what they're told to see, that they are a match set of capable necromancers, and Coronabeth is also beautiful, and Ianthe just kind of sits in her shadow. But it was all an act. She says that Daddy wanted a match set, and we didn't want anything to split us up, and so we created the lie. And I'm not even certain I assume that Naberius knew and was trying to help cover, but sometimes it made me wonder. But I think that's why that he was telling Corona to drop the sword, because she was so clearly more physically capable than necromancers. Necromancers are not healthy. They can't do anything physical for very long because the necromancy eats at them. But Corona is perfectly healthy and has like muscle tone and all that, and so she's able to perform more like the way a cavalier would without the necromancy. And so if she practices too much with a sword and people see her, it gives up the lie. But Anthe has figured things out, and Corona is off in the corner of this room crying her eyes out because, she just saw her sister kill her other friend. And as she says, Anthe could have killed Corona to also get the lictoral hood. It doesn't need to be a particular person. It should be the cavalier, so that you know each other, and the cavalier soul knows how to exist, essentially.
Not just that though, but they go into it quite a bit more in the second book. But there's a reason why it also needs to be a cavalier, but theoretically could be anybody, I guess. But
yeah, for the lictorhood of having a soul to burn for eternity, that could be anyone. But there's a purpose for it to cavalier. There's a purpose that it's a rapier instead of a two-hander, because necromancers can't wield a two-hander because they're too emaciated by the necromancy. That's what a rapier is. Light. It is simple. Anyone can pick it up without any weightlifting capabilities. Which is why Gideon says to lift weights.
Right. Could you have done some squats? Anything?
Some star jumps. They're not hard. I'll shut up.
Right. Yeah. I think I just read that part. So yeah.
In this room that they are in this last lictoral lab that they open into, there's also the words written on the side of the wall, "You lied to us." And they're just there. But the only one who does kind of twig onto it is Sextus. Anthe has done something that's so morally horrible that Octokizron has to fight her, because that's not allowed. Even though that's exactly what they were there to do for.
The one thing the Emperor, their god, has said, don't do that. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. And he makes all the wrong decisions at this point, because, she did the thing that they were there to do. She became a lictor, and as everyone understands, most of them are making the choice. I'm not going to do that to my cavalier that I love so much. But she doesn't care about Turn, and so therefore she kills him so easily. And Octokizron decides to fight her. He banishes Column, and something takes Column's place. Exactly what Teacher was warning about the whole time. And Column even warned about it. Don't send me away this time. Don't do it. And some monstrosity that is like a zombie on steroids takes over, and Anthe kills it. And she is struggling with it, but she is so extremely capable now as a baby lictor that she's probably the only one who could have done anything. And She says, "You get that one for free," and disappears in like a blood splatter. And Sextus
really
had also disappeared.
Did they use that? Was that like teleportation necromancer magic, or what was that?
We don't get an explanation. Yeah. So, the way that the lictors are handled in the first book, it's like they are basically just like baby gods, right?
Yes.
Which is, good. You it's there and whatever, but yeah, it does leave some things wanting from the second book so far as I've read anyway, where it's just like Ianthe basically has like all sorts of crazy supernatural powers in like 35 seconds because of what she did. They sort of explain some of it, but I don't know that you ever see, again, haven't finished the book, but like you don't see it on that level. But then they do other crazy things that they make it sound just passé because of what the lictors actually are and what they can actually do. Plus the fact that it's like, even if you just took like a normal person and made them live for 10,000 years, what would that look like? Mm-hmm. So like they are fucking amazing at whatever their specialties were in the first place, and they are amazing sword fighters and just so forth and so on. But yeah, they're very much in the first book. She basically is a minor deity at that point. We have to assume that the Necrolord Prime is even more of a badass because he's the guy in charge of all of these baby deities, But yeah, to me, that's one of those scenes that's like so chaotic that it's like, maybe I should go read it again, because she's like, by the way, I ate my dude and I reverse engineered it. And you're all fools. And then I fucked up some other things and then disappear. And it's like, please come back and explain something. I don't know. But
I think Sextus had also figured it out, but he basically disregarded becoming a lictor.
Yeah. He figured it out so early, but he won't do anything to hurt Camilla, and therefore he won't. But he also knows quite a lot more even than that.
That's why he uses his death curse for turbo cancer.
Exactly.
Right.
getting right to that. So when he had kind of bumped up against the words of "you lied to us," which was new in the room and not 10,000 years old, and he was able to put some things together. In particular, the reveal that Dulcinea is not Dulcinea. And as they're leaving this room that both Colum and Silas and Naberius are dead in, Camilla explains that he's been a ninny over Dulcinea for the past 15 years, and they've been exchanging letters, but he's never met her in person until they both came to the electoral trial. He became the heir of the sixth house just to meet her on even footing. He asked her to marry him a year before so that she would spend the rest of her days with someone who cared about her and not someone who was trying to hold her up as something beautiful and tragic. And when he put together that Dulcinea must be dead, and so he goes to the person who's pretending to be Dulcinea, and as Gideon is like, but I was like spending so much time with her and he didn't say anything. Why didn't he say anything? And if 5 people had died in that day, and yet she cares extreme amount about this tiny little petty interpersonal shit, but it matters to her. So she runs up and tells Harrow to go get her longsword or get her two-hander. And he was like, how did you have a two-hander?
Yeah, I think that's my favorite thing, is because she's hidden it in her things the entire time. She's had these secret training sessions and everything, and she's like, Harrow, go get my two-hander. And Harrow's like, what? Like, why do you have that here?
How did you stick that into a trunk? But yeah, she's got and Harrow goes and gets it after making comments of, I hated that thing. That thing always felt like it was going to kill me.
Oh, once upon a time.
Yeah, we're hoping, but
quite the writing, you lied to us. My interpretation from, or maybe I missed something. It was the lictor who had written all those messages. She'd written that one for the emperor.
She did. Yeah, that was the point. It was going to be found. She needed that little room to be hidden because of that, and that's she had killed Abigail, as she's explaining to Sextus, as Sextus had frozen Gideon to just kind of hear the whole conversation out in the room, and like, tell Camilla, she knows what to do, and gets the information of Kithareia had killed Potezalawis very quickly, gotten some information from Dulcinea of like who were her friends and was she married and everything like that, but otherwise they were very passable to each other, and so she took her place, and she was the lictor on the place where they could never return to draw him back in, and the emperor was going to watch his 9 houses die in the most tragic way because he was too far away to do anything about it. And this, like, she is deranged, but like, why do you hate this man that you've served for 10,000 years? I hated him, I loved him, but like, it's both the love and the hate is both the same thing to her now, and she must destroy everything. And she has the same blood cancer as Dulcinea, and Sextus was just getting her to talk a little bit longer so that she could make the turbo cancer worse and up to the point of nearly killing her. And he does the thing that he wishes people wouldn't do and explodes himself in a thanergetic blast to do the death curse, essentially, and to get her to the point of nearly dying, or as much as he could. And she walks out of that blast to Gideon and says, I am Kithareia the First, and this begins with you, Gideon the Ninth. And there's a gigantic fight.
I like that setup, like how make it believable that these very powerful lictors, that she can be beaten with him turning up this cancer she's had all this time. So she has to spend most of her energy to hold that back. So the fight seems pretty believable to me.
Yes.
I like
that. And that's the thing. Like she basically gets like 3 to 5 handicaps over the course of their fight until it's almost fair. And because like one of the main things that they can do just in a regular stand-up fight is that they can just straight up regenerate any wound nearly instantaneously, for reasons of the process that might be clear by now. Like, they're amazing necromancers and cavaliers, so she's just got all of this going for her, and it's like she can do 2+ things at once all the time. So it's like, even as the very few remaining people start to try and square off with her, it's, I mean, for lack of a better word, like it's or description, and the director can hate me for this, it's like watching them fight Thanos. Like, he just, like, Kithareia just straight up just smashes everybody. And this is while she's been blown to bits and has turbo cancer. It's like she's just trouncing everybody. So
Gideon and Camilla and Harrow all about as capable as they can try to be against one lictor, and they're losing a lot. And she basically just covered up some of the injuries of the blast and the cancer so that she wasn't openly bleeding. But Camilla is able to figure out that she needs a source of thalargy, which is the life energy, to be able to do anything with. And so she's handicapped from that. Until Ianthe decides to join in. And she was very capable as being a new baby lictor, but she's only been in for all of 5 minutes. And therefore Kithere is able to kind of trounce her. And the lictor makes a great battery. And so, okay, now she's healing. Now she's got life energy.
Oops.
Right.
Yeah. We get to see some of Harrow with her perpetual ash because the monster that killed Isaac and Jean-Marie is there and doing its all crazy monster arm thing. And so Harrow pins it with her perpetual ash, so it takes it a while. And Ianthe does some weird, crazy things with blood, of like making a net out of blood and try to hurt her. It's just a decent
She's
job.
doing like blood magic through everything, like body magic of some kind.
Yeah, that does
That's
seem to be
like her
something that she
specialty.
works with a lot.
Yeah.
And then let's see.
Blood shields and blood that like tearing all this.
Right.
There's a moment between Camilla and Gideon of like, did the warden say anything to me? Did he have a message? Gideon says, he said that he loved you.
Yeah.
And Camilla's like, what?
What?
Like,
No, he didn't.
No, he said he'd know what to do. It's like, yes, I do. And that's what Camilla was looking for. You'll see.
Right.
And Camilla's also, she sees that there's a particular like spot of cancer on the back of Kithere. She's basically fighting naked because her clothes has been blown off. If we hit that thing, it'll probably hurt her. And she tries, kind of fails. And then Ianthe runs away after her right arm has been ripped off because Lictor doesn't quite help. And when a Lictor loses a body part, it stays gone. But it's just going to constantly be trying to heal it over anyway.
Which is a really weird. Like, I mean, you can regenerate, but not really. If
Well, it's
you
the same
lose the
reason
limb.
that Kithere has been dying of blood cancer for 10,000 years. It stayed static for the whole time. She's always been on that same brink, and so she's been suffering from it. Even though she's constantly regenerating, she's regenerating to the point that she incorporated her capillary love day.
Yeah, but I mean, that's Deadpool's thing. Like, he keeps regenerating his cancer.
Exactly.
Well, you cracked it open. Thanks for solving that for us.
It is. It's that.
That's what it is. So, but it's like I feel like at some point you've crossed the wires of regenerated healing, but not for this thing for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about probably innumerable times, things are more interesting by their limits because otherwise, like, the lictors basically don't have any limits. That is literally the point of the lictoral process in this thing, because the other beef that I have, like, if you're going to have beef about like, oh, okay, well, you can regenerate up to this point, like, the reason why the lictors are so badass and powerful as they are is because of the way that they consume a soul, and it basically becomes a battery for, as near as they can tell, for all time, which is not how it works ever again. And so, like, that's kind of one of the things, like, they talk about a lot more in my understanding about the magic system in the second book and that sort of thing. But, like, the reason why their government works the way that it is and they're on these wars and stuff like that is because they use up the magic of a place and then they go to, like, new places, except for somehow in their home system and when it comes to eating their cavaliers. But everywhere else, it seems like they eat up the magic of a place and then they spread, which, forms an empire, which pisses off apparently everybody else in the galaxy, or for the universe, apparently, because it's much more than a galaxy. But,
Also, why don't they dark hollow this shit and just swallow up a bunch of people?
Because
right. Well,
they do need people
insanity,
as groups.
Right, but in theory,
go do a
like,
thing.
I feel like someone like Ianthe probably would have been like, I'm going to eat all of you. I feel like that's the way to do it.
The 500 into 50, right? Like, and that's something that, at least to where I am, like, I'm curious about, like, why is he the Necrolord Prime? Like, is there something that physically makes him more powerful than everybody else? He was certainly the first, as near as I can tell, but, like, I don't know if that gets explained. So
I got a hint in the first book. I feel like, if I remember it correctly, he killed the first planet. Like, he took the soul of the planet or something.
There's some of
That
that.
sounds vaguely
That's
familiar.
without getting into it. You should read the second book to know more. So
Yeah. I don't have a poker face, so I'm just going to ignore everything.
yeah, you're terrible. I want to play cards against you. Yeah.
I cannot hold whatever. Continuing with there's so little left. Okay. Camilla and Gideon and Harrow get pinned down. They hide under a bone that Harrow makes to try to shield it down. And all they're trying to do is basically survive. They know that the Emperor flagship is going to be there. So what are their ways of trying to survive? Camilla offers to be a distraction. The other two leave, and it's not going to work. Gideon has a shattered knee, so she can't really move anymore. Harrow says, get in a bone and jump into the water, and you'll float if you survive the landing. That's not going to work. And Gideon knows what she has to do. So she impales herself on an iron grate straight through the heart and says to Harrow, you know what to do. And if you don't do it, all of it will be for nothing. And so Harrow.
And then she falls.
Yes.
And I think I read that one like 3 times. Like, wait, are you shitting me right now? So
right. Yeah. Then it's Harrow is crying at Gideon, you can't be dead. It's like, no, I'm just an imagination thing of all the brain chemicals going on because you're in shock.
I was so excited for like Gideon being in Harrow Lash style in the second book. That's not what it's setting up in the second book at the start, at least. And I was so excited for that. I thought that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda. But this is a director chosen book, so you gotta hate yourself.
Well, to my mind, it reinforces the very adjacent grim darkness of the setting, and also kind of reinforces some of the other points that I was making earlier about, them being in love, you jackass. So, but keep reading. So
right. Yes,
I don't get why she had to do the breaking with the sword. Like, why didn't she just take the sword and kill herself?
Because that would have made it all for nothing. Gideon gave her life so Harrow would live. To throw away her own life would ruin that.
Yes, but she
not just live, but like beat Kytherea. But she had to force her hand, so I think
this is how you go Super Saiyan. You have to watch somebody you love die.
Yeah, but why not just kill yourself with the sword instead of breaking through things to fall on the grate? Why not
the grate was already broken.
It's more dramatic that way.
Yeah, it's more dramatic.
Right. It's a two-hander.
The lengths might be a bit difficult.
Fall on it. I don't know. It seemed gratuitous.
The grate was right there. Why do extra work?
Yeah, right.
She had to break something to get
because of the memes, the tropes, Andreas. The hero has to fall before they can die. They don't just die; they fall first. So
okay.
Harrow and Gideon together are able to wield the sword enough to drive it straight through Kytherea's heart with all of the damage and all of the many things that have happened to her, that they're finally able to kill the lictor that's trying to kill them. And Gideon is saying, yep, I'm going now. Lift some weights and keep the sword with you and bye. And Harrow is like, but I can't imagine a universe without you. Sure you can. It's just, that's awesome and that's hot.
Yeah, right. Probably just platonic relationship, between sisters.
Platonic.
So. Yeah, but close family friends.
Yes. Yeah.
You can love someone without it being romantic.
Not to mention, like you did read
case.
the part. The first thing she asks the Emperor, right? Like again, like
yes.
This isn't Sam and Frodo. They ain't buddies. They would have been fucking.
Anyway. Harrow wakes up and she's in a spaceship and the Emperor is there, and the first thing she does, falls on her knees, is please resurrect Gideon the Ninth. I will give everything I have and never ask it for anything more ever again. And he says that he can't. If he were to pull out Gideon's soul from hers, it would take hers with and it would kill her. And he really needs lictors. And he describes everything went so totally wrong because they were supposed to figure it out and then make the choice to do so or to not. It wasn't supposed to be under duress that it was. Harrow had decided that she wasn't going to kill Gideon that she loved so much. It was forced on her. Gideon had forced her hand to make it work because that was the only way to get out. And the Emperor still needs lictors. They do need help. The Empire is under attack. And whoever had put Kytherea up to it is still out there. And he asks for Harrow's help, and she says yes, she will go with him. And then
And
Harrow the
lictors
Ninth.
get to the center of the Tootsie Pop. That's how it works.
So that is Gideon the Ninth.
Oh, we did it! Yay!
We did it.
It only took 2 hours.
Well, we didn't
And
have to have the
10 minutes.
digression with Ben.
And I didn't think we were gonna, like we said, it's not. We weren't gonna do the thing that you did, where we just went through every single fucking chapter.
Did we
I thought
say that, or did we say that, and the director said, "I'm going to do what the fuck I want to do"?
Apparently,
It's the only template I don't really know how to do anymore. So therefore, either do something different or shut up and deal with it.
She's in charge, so you got to
I
shut up
guess
and
we're
deal
kind of
with it.
with the movies. We're just talking
You
about the
gotta
good
deal with
parts, bad parts, and I like this, I didn't like this. And
Speaking of
all
things
that.
you got to deal with, you got to deal with the fact that Harrow and Gideon would have been like that.
Yeah.
had they
Oh
lived.
yeah. Obviously, Gideon's the top because she works out, and I'm just saying.
You know what? That's the thing. She's not still. She's not the top in that relationship.
But she was like, come on. So,
No.
On a
She
physical sense.
and you can't tell me that the sexual tension wasn't there in the pool. Go read that shit again, Andreas. Like, you're either going to wake up or you're going to be even more squicked out by your presumed incestuous relationship.
No, this is
that
what
they
happens
had.
when
Like,
Andreas goes outside. He misreads things.
Apparently,
I just-
you're about for the second book, Justin. You're about to hit the thing, the whole, like everything. I was
the
just
whole
checking your-
thing, right? I know there's like 53 outstanding questions, but they're all going to be answered in 100 pages. I'm not holding my breath, but like, holy
just
crap,
checking.
like
The ending
because-
is intense. Yes,
Yeah.
Harrow the Ninth as a book is confusing. It is half of it is in second person, more or less about half. But it works.
Yeah.
It is important. It is
It's fucking
probably
shit.
the only real book I've ever read in second person, and it wouldn't have worked without it.
Well, and yeah, I mean, for your guys' benefit, I mean, kind of what I told my wife when I was describing it is like, have you ever read a book where the primary character is insane? It makes the book really fucking hard to follow. And so the book is really hard to follow, and there's a lot more questions that are added as we're going along. They still haven't answered, like they've answered a chunk from where I am. So like the payoffs are starting to get there, but at the same time, it's like, like right now I'm in the cheering part of the climax, right? Where I'm like, oh, hey, the good guys might make it, right before inevitably another bottom drops out, right before the heroes theoretically make it. But it's also grimdark. So I'm not sure. And yeah.
I think Tamsyn has a problem, because like we all said, the first half of this book was not great, and then it got pretty good of Gideon. And like a reviewer I really like, Patrick, YouTube, Goodreads, whatever. He says also like first 70% of Harrow is a 1-star book, and then the final 30% is a 4-star book. Or like
Easily. I absolutely agree with that, because like, so one of the things that I put in place when I watched Odd Thomas on Netflix many years ago was like, Odd Thomas is kind of like that, where it's like 2/3 of it, 70%, whatever, are just okay, and maybe raise a couple of compelling, twists on, some like D&D monsters that I'm familiar with and whatever. And then they introduce the feels, and that's not appropriate for an otherwise mediocre story. And so I kind of realized that it was like, look, I can hate it all I want, but if it elicited feelings from me, I think it's going to be a 4-star minimum. And I'm kind of there with Gideon the Ninth, where it's like, I really don't like this book most of the time. But then the ending is so well done that it picks everything else up with it. And it's a rough place to be, because I understand Ben, right? Like I can't just badger him for not having read it. I could badger him for not having read it and then showing up to the episode where we're going to discuss his not having read it. But, like it's not like it's like my favorite book series of all time. Like it kind of just washes out in a way. And so the pun better be the most amazing pun. But,
Yeah, she kind of has the reverse author problem. Often, like authors can't end books well. Like at least for Gideon, the second half and the ending, it's all good, really good. But it's a rough start in Gideon, at least, and apparently it's similar for Harrow the Ninth.
Arrow is confusing, and yes, as Justin says, like you're with a protagonist that is insane. She cannot trust herself.
All of a sudden.
You'll see.
Yeah.
You did not get to see Harrow inside herself in Gideon the Ninth. You only saw Gideon's perspective, and now you will see how
Right.
it is like to be Harrow. And it's harsh. It's damaging. She is a very broken person, and I love her so
somebody
much.
might even somebody might even say that it is harrowing. So
And with that line, this has been Wild Wild.
It wasn't even
That's a
me.
series of the Dresden Files podcast.
We'll
Jeez.
be back.
Did you say a subsidiary of the Dresden Files podcast? Like this is
I just made something up.
okay.
yeah,
No, I
we're
mean,
He doesn't
we're in
speak
charge
English.
of ourselves.
I mean, good for us, but still.
All right, we'll be back
End
in
it.
2 weeks to discuss Harrow. You have to keep reading.
This is the episode that is necromantically driven by the director's thallergy. So
Yeah, it's gonna
Energy.
be a rough 2 weeks for me.
Didn't even go.
well,
with someone for
thallergy
the
is
shit
the
that was
life.
paid.
So unless you're undead and didn't tell me, so